Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable, see playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 3481, Encounter. This guy is really... Fuxi sighed silently with profound resignation. Initially, while he was at the bottom of the chaos, he was honestly not convinced that Gerald had chosen Zen. However, now it seemed that Gerald had a foresight. He then realized that Zen was indeed the person that they could rely on, and was also the most suitable person to complete the finale way in this round of chaos. The news that Claire and the Grand Master of Heaven fought for Zen in the Grand Plain stage had been spread to the Pear Hill. The two top masters on the other shore might have already expected this. Even so, Zen's magical bloodline was still beyond everyone's expectations. While Fuxi was lost in thought, the snake goddess's eyes flashed. In that moment, she sensed a strong space fluctuation in the distance. She felt as though the fluctuation contained a familiar aura and full vitality. She then gracefully stretched out two fingers. From there, two strands of crimson energy rubbed against each other and produced a violent reaction. At the same time, the formed energy let out a sharp scream, which could be transmitted far away in the space channel. The fluctuation in the distance suddenly stopped and swiftly approached the snake goddess. Soon, an unexpected visitor appeared in the space channel. It was the Chaos Ancient God, Gerald. Previously, he was trapped by the strange black fire released by the Grand Master of Heaven. The black fire could hardly be put out, so it took a lot of time for him to completely extinguish it. After successfully putting out the black fire, he hurriedly dashed forward to catch up. However, after the fierce battle between the Grand Master of Heaven and Fuxi, the snake goddess, the group had already been far away from him. Gerald continued to travel through several large provinces and unexpectedly met the snake goddess and the other two here. Are you all right? After taking a look at the snake goddess and Fuxi, he turned to look at Zen. He was most concerned about Zen. The sincerity was reflected in his tone as he spoke. Yeah, the snake goddess replied. While the Grand Master of Heaven was fighting with Othniel, we took the opportunity to escape. What happened? Gerald asked worriedly. What he just heard had him stunned. The snake goddess then told Gerald about the fact that Zen had released Othniel. The latter was so shocked upon hearing this revelation that he could not help but let out several cries in disbelief. However, we can't stay here for too long. If the two of them figure it out, I'm afraid they will stop fighting and start to head out for us, Gerald said quietly. In fact, the Grand Master of Heaven, Othniel, and Claire fought for the same reason. They all wanted to kill each other and get Zen. All they wanted starting from the very beginning was Zen. The fight between the Grand Master of Heaven and Othniel was meaningless other than for the purpose of getting revenge. You're right, we can't stay here for too long, the snake goddess said with a nod. Come on. Just as he spoke, Gerald grew to several times bigger than before, like a massive ship floating in front of the three people. The three skillfully jumped onto Gerald's back, and Gerald sped along the space channel at high speed. Although Gerald was not like Othniel who could control the space truth, he was better than the snake goddess and Fuxi in terms of speed. Standing on Gerald's back, Fuxi sighed. Gerald had always been arrogant, but now surprisingly, he was willing to carry them on his back, all thanks to Zen. Swoosh! The air let out a sound as they dashed swiftly. They headed west for the Pear Hill. After passing two provinces in a row, they were finally able to enter the Victory Province, through which they would arrive in the Pear Hill. As soon as they entered the Victory Province, they saw a golden light flash by the mountain range in the distance. Then, a bolt of golden lightning as thick as a bucket swept upward. Suddenly, a powerful sound shook the whole area. Boom! The sound echoed and shook the ground slightly. It was obvious that some people were fighting in the mountain, creating the booming sound. They might be at the Holy Soul Realm at least. Zen heard from the snake goddess that after the flying ships of the Oneness Sky Palace were broken, the elites of the palace could not do anything but walk towards the Pear Hill. It was very likely that the people who were fighting were from the palace. I'll go and have a look, Zen said before leaping towards the sound's direction. In a flash, Zen's figure was up in the air and reached the top of the mountain. A huge crack, as deep as 100,000 feet, was formed in the middle of the mountain. At the bottom of the crack, Flamen carried the red crystal which contained Eastern Emperor Tai. Her black hair was disheveled and her clothes were dirty and ripped. She was no longer as elegant and dignified as before. Beside her stood Athamar, Gorin and Pierce, each holding a sharp and glimmering sword. Zen was gone. For now, their top priority was to send Eastern Emperor Tai to the Pear Hill. Finally, they had already arrived in the Victory Province. They were exhausted and catching their breath. They had never expected that they would be hunted down by the Bering race on the way. Above the crack stood the 5 element emissaries of the Bering race. During the fierce battle just now, 2 of the 5 element emissaries were injured by Pierce. Because of this, they didn't dare to attack by force for the time being. Instead, they continued to display their thurgies above the crack. The golden lightning that appeared earlier was the golden toad lightning released by the metal emissary. After releasing the golden toad lightning, the metal emissary spoke in a sharp voice, "No matter what, you're all dead. Why don't you hand over Eastern Emperor Tai? If you do so, we can still let you go." This time, the Bering race, the Divine Farmer race, and the New Moon race all came out, and they had suffered a great defeat. The Divine Farmer fled with the Yellow Thirch's broken body, and the remaining members scattered in different directions. The 5 element emissaries were the elites of the Bering race, and their status was only second to that of the Yellow Thirch. It was difficult for them to accept such a crushing defeat, but as they were unable to join the battle for Zen, they then just aimed their attacks at Eastern Emperor Tai and Yasemin. They were divided into 2 groups. The Holy Soul Realm Masters of the New Moon race and the Divine Farmer race were responsible for chasing after Yasemin, while the 5 element emissaries were responsible for chasing after Eastern Emperor Tai. They chased desperately all the way and finally caught up with Pierce and his group in the Victory Province. As they joined hands with each other, their strength doubled and they were able to block the way of Pierce and the others below. If it weren't for the fact that they were afraid of the mysterious swordsmanship thurgies of Pierce and Gorin, they would have already killed them. Standing behind Flamen, Elvinia looked up at the 5 people in the sky. She was frowning and was confused. She didn't expect the situation to change so fast. The day Zen was trapped in the Eternal Scroll painting, all the people of the Oneness Sky Palace began to flee, but they were still unable to escape this chaos. If Eastern Emperor Tai died, the Oneness Sky Palace would completely disappear in the Source World. Thinking of this, Elvinia couldn't fathom what was happening. It was as if she were dreaming. "Let us go. Huh, do you think I'm a fool?" Pierce's cold voice floated up along the crack. He scoffed as he finished his sentence. He had decided to fight until his last breath. There was no uncertainty in his tone or his expression. Besides, even if he retreated, he would surely die. It was then better to take this opportunity and fight head-on. "Ha ha, if you keep wasting time like this, you won't be able to escape death in the end. Why don't you just do as I say?" Realizing that they wouldn't surrender, the metal emissary laughed wildly. Then, another golden toad lightning as thick as a bucket smashed down powerfully. Boom, boom, explosive sounds covered the whole area once again. The surroundings were chaotic. Broken stones flew and dust filled the air, making it difficult to see. Pierce, Athamar and the others tried their best to defend themselves, but in the end, they still failed. Just as what the metal emissary said, they would die at the bottom of the crack sooner or later. "Let's fight them to death. Lady Flamen, run away with Eastern Emperor Tai and Princess Elvinia. I'll pin them down. Even if I die, I will die fighting and they shall die with me." Determination was written all over the faces of Pierce, Athamar, and Gorin. They still had a way to win, and that was to burn their other shore tokens. Chapter 3482, Rescue. The power of the 3 masters at the Holy Soul Realm burning their other shore tokens would be quite intimidating. However, they had to pay the price of such power with their lives. But, Flamen hesitated. If they stayed, the reinforcements would come to aid them. She pitied the lives of these elders of the Oneness Sky Palace. "Don't hesitate," Pierce said seriously. "As soon as we go out, follow us," Athamar declared with determination in his eyes. When the 3 of them were about to go out and burn their other shore tokens, they heard a voice from above. "Since you can't escape death anyway, I can let you die a little faster," the voice said. Upon hearing the voice, Pierce and the others were shocked. Elvinia tilted her head and looked up at the sky. The owner of the familiar voice stood opposite the 5 element emissaries. Coincidentally, the owner of the voice also looked down. Although he was 100,000 feet away, Elvinia felt that he was close, and a strange warm feeling filled her heart. Ordinary people would be overjoyed if they survived a disaster, but Elvinia wasn't. The warm feeling overwhelmed her senses, and she was calm and happy. "Is that Zen? Is he awake?" Has he made it to the eternal realm? Even at such a critical moment, what they cared about was still whether Zen had reached the eternal realm or not. If he had reached the eternal realm, then it naturally meant that he was stronger and might be able to defeat the 5-element emissaries. Speaking of the 5-element emissaries, they were all stunned when they saw Zen, who appeared like a ghost. They weren't concerned about the battles of the masters at the eternal realm. After all, those had nothing to do with them. Furthermore, the pair hill only had Fuxi and the snake goddess. They should be the weakest of the three parties, and they would surely be defeated. However, did it mean that the pair hill had won since Zen appeared safe and sound? While the 5-element emissaries had yet to recover from their shock, the leader, the metal emissary, coldly said, "He is all alone, and he has just reached the eternal realm. He's no match for the 5 of us." The 5-element emissaries were extremely powerful if they worked together. They could even fight eternal realm warriors. Since Zen had just reached the eternal realm, there was a big difference between his strength and the senior eternal realm warriors. Moreover, he was alone, so the 5-element emissaries didn't take him seriously. When the metal emissary finished speaking, he pointed towards Zen. Boom! The golden toad lightning, as thick as a bucket, hit Zen's body. The moment it touched him, the ancestry-level bloodline inside his body fluctuated, and he learned about the golden toad lightning's structure. The branch of the third lightning energy from the destruction area. It is not pure, and very weak. He reached out and grabbed the golden lightning in his hand. Because the lightning itself didn't have a real body, it could only flash by. However, it froze when he grabbed it. It was like a golden stone pillar, which extended from his hand to the front of the metal emissary. Crack! He squeezed hard. The golden stone pillar began to crack, and it shattered into countless pieces on the ground. The primeval Lord of Heaven had once used the imprisoning lightning on the other shore to transform the lightning, which the magical thunder slave had released, into solid lightning powder. That imprisoning lightning was from stage 33, and it was not easy to obtain it. But with merely a thought, Zen had transformed the golden toad lightning by using a method that was very different from the primeval Lord of Heavens. What kind of theurgy is that? Naturally, the 5-element emissaries were all confused. They couldn't figure out how Zen had solidified the lightning in an instant. It doesn't matter. Let's fight together. Tribulation array of 5 elements. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Each of the 5-element emissaries stood in their positions. 5 different colored lights connected them, which formed a 5-pointed star. They activated their array, which released a powerful aura of energy. Then, a large lock flew from the array and shot towards Zen. At that point, Pierce, Athamar, and Goran just came out of the crack. When they felt the power of the array, all of them looked alarmed. Zen, retreat. Even the real Eternal Realm Masters can't resist the tribulation array of 5 elements. Pierce shouted. Zen was speechless when he heard Pierce's warning. Did Pierce mean that he was not a real Eternal Realm warrior? Splash. However, he didn't dodge. He allowed the lock to land on his body. Oh. Why didn't you dodge? The water emissary said with raised brows. How arrogant of you. You will die. The earth emissary laughed manically. On the contrary, the fire emissary looked vigilant. Among the 5-element emissaries, the fire emissary was the first one who had encountered Zen. Not long after Zen stepped onto the other shore, he had turned their temple in stage 4 upside down. At that time, they still didn't know who the mysterious man was. He was not a proud and arrogant man. He must be confident in himself, so he dared to do the things he did. As soon as the lock secured Zen, the ancestry-level bloodline inside his body fluctuated again. The fluctuation of the ancestry-level bloodline caused by the metal emissaries' attack and the 5-element emissaries' joint attack wasn't as intense as when it was against the Eternal Realm powerhouses. Part of the theurgies used by the 5-element emissaries are from the element spirit race, right? Zen said. He grabbed the lock and pulled it slightly. It's just so, he sighed. Just as he was about to break the lock, he suddenly looked up at the sky. The others didn't understand why he did that, but they also did the same. It seems that I don't need to do anything, Zen said and pursed his lips. Whoosh. The space above suddenly shattered, and then a huge scorpion tail struck the tribulation array of 5 elements. Gerald didn't need to use his poison needles on the 5-element emissaries because they were too weak. His scorpion tail contained a potent amount of power, which was enough to break the tribulation array of 5 elements and crush the 5-element emissaries into meat paste. The lock that bound Zen quickly disappeared when the tribulation array of 5 elements got destroyed. We don't have much time. We need to finish the battle as soon as possible, Gerald said. Even though only his tail was exposed, Pierce, Goran, and the others were still shocked at his aura as a Chaos Ancient God. After all, they didn't expect that Zen came with Gerald. Yet, it wasn't the first time that the people from the Oneness Sky Palace had seen the world. When they realized that it was the Chaos Ancient God Gerald, they all cupped their hands towards him. Soon enough, Flamen arrived with Elvenia and Eastern Emperor Tai. Then everyone else jumped onto Gerald's back and headed for the Pear Hill. While they traveled, Zen asked about Yasmin's whereabouts. Winchell, Auden, and the other elders of the Oneness Sky Palace escorted her. If they were lucky enough, they would be able to enter the Pear Hill's territory safely. However, when he asked about Dorothy, no one responded to him. According to Elvenia, Dorothy had been missing when Yasmin got trapped. When the people of the Oneness Sky Palace moved together, they still didn't see her. Chapter 3483, Defending. A frightening energy burst and flowed wildly throughout the huge triangular pyramid. The black flames occupied almost the entire space, as if they burned up from the most ferocious hell. And among it all, two gigantic creatures brawled like beasts in captive. The two powerful masters had used many theurgies and were now left with only their physical bodies to end this battle. Othniel might have had an absolute advantage in terms of spatial transference, but he still could not get the upper hand on the Grand Master of Heaven, who was giving it all he had. In fact, he was in grave danger. "Can this space you've created really bear my hellfire all the time?" said the Grand Master of Heaven, sneering. The relentless, unending black fire released from the 6 soul flags continued burning the space, causing numerous cracks to form. If they continued to grow, eventually the entire space would collapse with an enormous bang. The Grand Master of Heaven would then be free and Othniel would be no match for him. Whoosh! Dozens of 10 million foot-long space blades sliced at the Grand Master of Heaven. He responded by raising his cyan misty sword and waving it gently, collapsing the space blades as soon as they were touched by the cyan light that came off the sword. Othniel glanced at the cracks and a trace of worry crept into him, but he still allowed himself to say, "The space can withstand your flames for hundreds, even thousands of years." His body shuddered as he spoke and the cracks in the triangular pyramid quickly closed and the space recovered. He was unable to defeat the Grand Master of Heaven here. He had basically already lost. The man before him had surpassed the Chaos Ancient God. However, Othniel could delay this battle. The Grand Master of Heaven looked at the rapidly healing triangular pyramid and inquired, "You wish to take Zen away, right?" "What do you mean?" Othniel asked, staring down his opponent. "This sort of battle is meaningless," said the Grand Master of Heaven calmly. "They have already fled to the Pear Hill. At the very least, we should catch Zen and then we can resume this battle and find a winner." "You wish to call for peace?" Othniel asked astounded. "I just think that it would allow us both to get what we need," the Grand Master of Heaven replied smiling. Othniel shook his head. "How do I know you won't just attack me once I let you out?" This round of their bout revealed the gap between them to Othniel quite clearly. There was no way he would let the Grand Master of Heaven go without caution. "I will not attack you until I have destroyed the Pear Hill," the Grand Master of Heaven answered earnestly. "Why should I believe you?" Othniel asked, still not trusting him. The Grand Master of Heaven pondered for a moment before saying, "I can swear with the contract-restricting twin-headed snake." The contract-restricting twin-headed snake was the captain of the black ship's other shore token. Once an oath was made, the snake would form a huge restraint, and if one broke the oath, they would pay a heavy price. Naturally, Othniel had heard of the contract-restricting twin-headed snake. His large single eye blinked as he considered this, but he still seemed unconvinced. "If you have the snake, I will trust you for now," he said finally. "I don't, but someone else has it," said the Grand Master of Heaven. Soon after he spoke, several black ships came from the distance and stopped beside the triangular pyramid. The captain in a black cloak stepped out of one of the ships and gently knocked on the wall of the space. Othniel hesitated for a moment and then let the captain in. The Grand Master of Heaven then made an oath using the contract-restricting twin-headed snake, after which their battle finally subsided and the massive triangular pyramid was removed. "Grand Master of Heaven, are you off to the Pear Hill now?" asked the captain. "Of course," he answered. He was a man of action and would not give the Pear Hill any chance of escape. He turned to Othniel and said, "Will you be joining me?" Othniel snorted and was enveloped by a square space. In an instant, his huge body vanished right before the Grand Master of Heaven and the members of the black ship. Their agreement was that the Grand Master of Heaven would not make a move on Othniel before the Pear Hill was destroyed. Once that was done, no restriction existed and they would most likely battle for Zen once more. The Grand Master of Heaven was in such a hurry that Othniel could easily pretend it was none of his business. The captain looked at the place where Othniel had disappeared and reminded, Grand Master of Heaven, I'm afraid Othniel will not leave so easily. Of course he will not leave, the Grand Master of Heaven said, shrugging his shoulders with a stone-faced expression. And he can't leave either. The captain did not understand what he had meant, he simply nodded, led him onto the ship and began heading west. On the ship, the evil god sat cross-legged, falling into a deep and strange trance. When he closed his eyes, he still saw many large provinces in the distance, connected together. Every time he entered a large province, an invisible tentacle extended towards him, trying to establish a connection. Once it was completed, the evil god was connected to this province. Every detail of the entire province would be laid bare before his eyes, and the harm he suffered would be transferred to the boundary wall of the province. This ability was very useful, but the evil god was not satisfied with it. Above his head was a space wider still, it was the entire source world. He could feel the tentacle representing the entire source world, but it was only faintly visible, seeming to evade him. His goal was to make contact with this tentacle. 2 hours after the snake goddess and the others returned to the Pear Hill, milky white clouds rose up above the whole province. If one stood at the highest point in the source world and looked down, they'd see that it seemed the largest mountain in the source world had been covered in snow rather quickly. The layers of clouds spread like a waterfall, creating a wondrous and beautiful scene. The people in the Pear Hill, however, were not pleased but worried. This was the cloud cover array, the most powerful array of the Pear Hill, which had not been opened for a great many years. Its activation meant the Pear Hill now faced an incredibly formidable enemy. Not long ago, when the Pear Hill was under constant provocation from the Bering race, news arrived that the temporary peace in the source world would probably not last much longer. The reality often came faster than rumors. After the cloud cover array was set up, the whole Pear Hill was like a giant beast crawling across the ground. Under the jadeite platform atop the Pear Hill, the 9 mountain leaders and more than 200 grand sect leaders had already gathered and awaited orders. From the center of the platform, the snake goddess glanced at the mountain leaders and the grand sect leaders and said, all the sects and mountains have to restrain their own disciples from going out. For the next several months, no one is allowed to leave. The mountain leaders and grand sect leaders raised their heads and looked at the snake goddess in astonishment, their faces filled with confusion. The Pear Hill was in danger. They had to pledge to fight to the death to defend it. Why had the snake goddess suddenly issued this ban? Chapter 3484, The Restriction of the Energy Shaft. The leader of a mountain stepped forward and bowed before the snake goddess. Snake goddess, why are we banned from leaving our places? If an enemy were to attack, all the elites of our hot mountain will go all out to fight. We will even be ready to give up our lives to protect our place. Another mountain leader stepped forward, her lips set in a firm line. These leaders of the various mountains and sects were loyal to the snake goddess. The crisis of the Pear Hill was also their crisis. It would be a great insult to them if they couldn't stand up for it in times of danger. The snake goddess looked at them in silence and then at the cloudy sky. She then said, the battle we are going to face is not something you can participate in. Why can't we participate? We aren't powerful enough, but we'd be pleased if we could do our bit. Not even an outstanding warrior at the Holy Soul Realm like the leader of the Hot Mountain can participate. These mountain and sect leaders were also top-level masters at the Holy Soul Realm. If they couldn't even participate in the battle, what kind of enemy would the Pear Hill have to meet this time? The snake goddess shook her head and said, even Fuxi and I can't protect ourselves in the battle that is to come. The leaders froze at these words. The people of the Pear Hill had immense confidence in the snake goddess and Fuxi. The reason why the Pear Hill had stood there for so many years was because of these two people. The Bering race and the Divine Farmer race were powerful, but if the Pear Hill could come together, these two races might not be able to defeat them. But the snake goddess was telling them that even she and Fuxi couldn't be sure of the fate they were about to meet in the coming battle. This was truly inconceivable. What kind of powerful existence in the source world can make it difficult for you to protect yourself? The leader of the Hot Mountain asked. Are they the Chaos Ancient Gods? The leader of the Witching Mountain pitched in. The snake goddess nodded. Yes, but also creatures that are stronger than them. Stronger than the Chaos Ancient Gods. How could such creatures exist in the chaos? Quote. The many leaders of the mountains and the sects were stunned as the snake goddess told them that other shore creatures could descend to the source world. This was not a secret, and there was no need for her to hide it from her subordinates. The mountain leaders remained silent for a moment, shocked to hear that the Grand Master of Heaven and Claire had descended to the source world. The leader of the Witching Mountain said, "Even if we are really mosquitoes in the grand scheme of things, we still have to contribute what little power we have. Yes, even if we die, we want to die a worthy death." Quote. The clamor began to rise, but the snake goddess raised her hand to silence them all, exercising her absolute authority over them. "There is a way you can contribute your power while you are in the Pear Hill. The cloud cover array can absorb your power," the snake goddess said. "What if it absorbs all of our power? There are so many of us and so many different kinds of power. Can the array make full use of our power?" The cloud cover array couldn't really achieve that, could it? If so many different kinds of power were gathered together, it would be in what felt like a violent flame. Not being careful would result in one being hurt by their own power. "The cloud cover array can't do it, but someone else can," the snake goddess said. "She needs your power." The leaders frowned at this. But their eyes soon lit up as they realized what it meant. These powerful cultivators at the Holy Soul Realm knew many secrets of the Pear Hill. After all, the snake goddess hadn't really secretly trained Yan somewhere. What was more, Yan also needed a group of warriors at the other shore realm and the chaotic source realm to protect her when she roamed the other shore. The secret of nurturing the energy shaft in Yan's body had already spread among the senior leaders. That was how they guessed almost immediately that there might be a big breakthrough in the energy shaft being nurtured in Yan's body. The moment the Chaos Ancient God, Gerald, entered the Pear Hill, he began to communicate with another two Chaos Ancient Gods, Kendrick and Judson. The 6 Chaos Ancient Gods each took charge of one kind of truth. They also had different understanding of the chaos, and a communication method at a different level, which ignored the distance. Because of the conflict between the Finale Way and the Purge Way, the Chaos Ancient Gods had been divided into 2 factions a long time ago. They had argued with each other in the beginning, but had ended up fighting fiercely together. At the time, however, the end of the chaos had still been distant to them, so the fierce battle had not reached a point where people fought to death. Herbert dragged Gerald to the bottom of the chaos. Herbert believed that everyone was equal and everyone should let things take their own course, but Judson had turned up and forced him away. The fierce battle among the Chaos Ancient Gods had thus finally stopped. It was now time they fought again. Once Zen arrived in the Pear Hill along with the others, he settled his companions from the Oneness Sky Palace. Then, with Fuxi leading the way, he went to see his sister, Yan, whom he hadn't seen for a long time. After they had parted last time, Zen had never seen his sister again, but had always protected her in some way or another. When Yan was on the other shore, all the humans she had met had taken good care of her. Since Zen had gotten rid of all the enemies along the way on the other shore, there were almost no force that could act against them. As a result, Yan was able to rapidly ascend to the upper stages on the other shore. Even before Elvinia had passed the test in the Soul City, Yan had already stepped into the Soul City. In addition to the improvement in her cultivation, the biggest change in Yan was the way she used the energy shaft. Yan had been able to draw a portion of that energy in the chaotic source world. She had still been weak at the time. Being able to draw and transform the energy of the evil god was already testing her limits. But the snake goddess's personal training, coupled with her own unique talent, pushed her into becoming more and more proficient in the use of the energy shaft until she could transform more and more energy. The snake goddess had always been prepared. Before Yan's energy shaft had completely matured, she could integrate different kinds of energy into one and transform it for her own use. The snake goddess thus changed the cloud cover array and set up positions on each mountain and sect, so that Yan could absorb the energy through these positions. Happy as she was to see her brother again, Yan told him about what she had gained during this period. "This energy shaft is interesting. If it can freely transform space, time and energy, and have infinite power as we're expecting, then it will be really powerful," Fuxi said, shrugging. It had been the snake goddess's idea to cultivate the energy shaft, and Fuxi hadn't thought highly of it. But what Yan had done had exceeded Fuxi's imagination. "I don't think I can do it yet. The maximum amount of energy I can transform is 700,000 divine megatons. I can't control the energy once it exceeds that amount," Yan said, shaking her head. "Is it because your body can't bear a more powerful force?" Zen asked. "No," Yan frowned. "The power doesn't fall on me. It is the energy shaft that can't bear too much power. And I don't have a way of strengthening it." No one could tell what kind of substance the energy shaft in Yan's body was made of, making it impossible to strengthen it like the way she had done to the magic treasures. If the strength of the energy shaft couldn't be increased, Yan's limit would probably be stuck where it now was. A warrior who could control 700,000 divine megatons of force could also be considered a powerful figure in the chaos. The ability had surpassed that of ordinary warriors at the Eternal Realm. The potential of the energy shaft was probably more than that. Yan looked at her brother, who had a faint smile on his face, and said, frowning, Zen, why are you smiling? It looks like there is a way to solve the energy shaft problem, Zen said, his smile broadening. Yan blinked, as Fuxi stared at Zen, gobsmacked. The information about the energy shaft had spread on the other shore for a while now. Now that Zen suddenly looked as if he was absolutely confident of solving the problem, they were naturally confused. It was at this moment that a green figure appeared above Zen's head, and asked Yan, can you show me your energy shaft? Chapter 3485, Salome. Yan's senses snapped alert at the appearance of the green figure transformed from the core of heavenly obsession civilization. The snake goddess had repeatedly advised her not to show the energy shaft to anyone. Yan wouldn't agree even if Fuxi wanted to take a look. This green figure had emerged from her brother's body, but she wouldn't show it the energy shaft without the snake goddess's consent. Are you confident enough to strengthen the energy shaft? The snake goddess asked as she walked into the hall. The energy shaft was special, and she had tried every means to strengthen it. She had tried to use the ice crystals from extremely cold places in the depths of the chaos, the precious meteorite from the source world, and all kinds of other special materials. But none of them had any effect on the energy shaft. The energy shaft was an independent object, barely reacting to the outside world. The snake goddess didn't know who this green figure was. Why was it able to give Zen so much confidence about strengthening the energy shaft? Zen's Thurgies were undoubtedly powerful, but even he couldn't strengthen the energy shaft. Even if he had absorbed the civilization artifacts, it would be impossible for him to do anything to the energy shaft, even with the help of the 39 human heroes in his mind. The snake goddess posed this question to the green figure in disbelief. Yes, the green figure replied. If I'm not mistaken, you used the quantity and energy method to refine the energy shaft. According to the energy reaction in her body, the energy shaft has now reached the 4th level. And you want to improve it to the 5th or even the 6th level. Am I right? The snake goddess's eyebrows shot up. The quantity and energy method is a method left behind by the calculation civilization. I'm not surprised that you know it. I know that there have been many civilizations interested in the energy shaft throughout the chaotic eras. But very few people are able enough to improve it to the 4th level, let alone the 5th and the 6th ones. I obviously want to, but I can't do it now. The snake goddess meant that since she couldn't do it, the green figure couldn't either. We only made a level 3 energy shaft at the time, the green figure said. The snake goddess nodded. A level 3 energy shaft sounded good, but was, in fact, ordinary. Several civilizations in history had made it, but had only been able to control tens of thousands of divine megatons of force. It would be better to train an Eternal Realm master than to spend so much effort on it. But over the years on the other shore, we have made thorough calculations and have a new idea to strengthen the energy shaft, the green figure continued calmly. Just an idea. The snake goddess glanced almost condescendingly at the green figure. If Zen hadn't released this green figure, it would already have been driven away. Time was pressing and the snake goddess didn't want to listen to its nonsense. Yes, just an idea, the green figure said. The defect of the energy shaft has existed since the quantity and energy method was designed. We neglected one important thing when we designed the method, the position of the energy shaft. You designed the quantity and energy method. The snake goddess's eyebrows rose in shock. Who are you? It's a member of the calculation civilization, Zen said as way of introduction. Fuxi, the snake goddess, and Yan were taken aback by this piece of information. It was obviously way beyond their expectations. They had never expected Zen to bring the creator of the energy shaft to them. The snake goddess looked embarrassed. She rolled her eyes at Zen's smiling face. You brat, why didn't you tell me this earlier? Zen chuckled but said nothing. When she turned to face the green figure this time, her attitude had undergone a great change. She had become modest as she began to ask some key questions. The energy shaft involved many complicated things. The green figure began to explain the relationship between space, time, and energy. Zen found it difficult to understand, but Yan's and the snake goddess's eyes lit up, because the green figure had just solved a lot of their problems. Not knowing how long this talk would last, Zen retreated from the main hall and sat on one side, his legs crossed. His eyes closed as an avatar materialized in the sky in his inner world, remaining there for a moment before entering the fairy palace. The last time Zen came to the fairy palace, Margaret had been pregnant for 5 months. Zen had been traveling on the other shore during this time, which was why he had no time to take care of her. He finally got the chance to visit her after he had left the eternal scroll painting. When he saw Margaret again, her slightly bulging belly had disappeared. She was holding a lovely baby girl in her arms. The baby girl was sleeping, curling up like a kitten. Zen couldn't help but blame himself. When Jeffrey was born, he had not been by Letitia's side. And he had been away again this time when his daughter was born. Margaret didn't blame Zen, though. She knew that Zen must have met a tricky problem since he was unable to accompany her. With Letitia and Aura taking care of her after the childbirth, she felt at ease. She told Zen that their daughter's name was Salome. "We came up with this name together. You can change it if you don't like it," Margaret said softly. Zen's face broke into a joyful grin as he held his daughter in his arms. He said, "It's a lovely name. There's no need to change it." Zen's strange aura caused Salome to suddenly burst into tears. She began to struggle in Zen's arms. Margaret picked up the scroll beside her and unfolded it in front of Salome. At the sight of the scroll, Salome calmed down almost immediately and began to smile through her tears. Zen looked at the scroll, confused. On it was just one Sanskrit word. He was stunned. Knowing that Zen would be curious, Margaret explained, "Salome seems to be innately interested in Sanskrit words. Just like Jeffrey." When Salome had started to cry and kept at it one day back in the past, Margaret hurried to visit Letitia with the baby in her arms. At the time, Letitia had been cultivating in seclusion to comprehend the truth of godly way. When Salome saw the Sanskrit words, she immediately stopped crying and became quiet and curious. From then on, Margaret had used Sanskrit words to coax and mollify her daughter and had been doing it for a few months. When Jeffrey deciphered the Sanskrit words, he didn't try to form conjectures about them. He understood their meanings by instinct. At her young age, Salome couldn't understand the meanings of the Sanskrit words, but the Sanskrit words she saw were different from those that ordinary people saw. The Sanskrit words meant more in her eyes. Zen was rendered speechless as he watched his daughter stare at the Sanskrit word with a smile on her face. It looked like she could also see the light dots of the abstruse energy world. It couldn't be a coincidence that both Jeffrey and Salome were interested in the Sanskrit words. His children could easily travel through the abstruse energy world, but he couldn't. The more he thought about it, the more confused he became. Chapter 3486, Judson's Test. Salome's blood vitality was extremely exuberant, thanks to the tonics that Zen had collected before she was born. With the abundant resources of the source world, she was born much stronger compared to the children of ordinary warriors. It was safe to say that in terms of strength alone, she was as strong as the warriors at the internal elixir realm in the eastern region. In the near future, she would definitely be an outstanding warrior in the source world and would have a great chance to reach the true god realm much faster than the others at her age. With her innate talent, she could obtain twice the expected result with just half the effort. Her cultivation would even be much faster than Jeffrey's. While Zen was staying in the fairy palace, he told his wives what was happening outside. He knew that they might worry, so he tried his best to describe and explain the situation with more optimism. Margaret, Lavender, and the others didn't think much about it, and just believed whatever Zen told them. However, Letitia immediately sensed that there was something wrong going on. The Oneness Sky Palace, which was considered one of the most powerful forces in the entire source world, had been destroyed. This would surely entail a drastic change. With this, Zen must be worried about the capability of the Pear Hill to survive the upcoming challenges. After leaving his inner world, Zen returned to the hall, and there he saw his sister, Yan, sitting with legs crossed, with a triangular shaft floating in front of her. The green figure of the calculation civilization kept whispering in her ear as she did what it said. The snake goddess and Fuxi were also there on the sides, watching Yan with faces full of expectation. Since the green figure had already fully explained the principles, it would just be a matter of time for her to improve and take the energy shaft one level further. As the snake goddess saw Zen return to the hall, she whispered to him, "If Yan can bring the energy shaft to level 5, it would be a great help to the Pear Hill. We need all the forces that we could acquire right now." Since the Pear Hill was in dire need of powerful warriors, Yan's breakthrough would be perfect timing. Upon hearing this, Zen smiled and responded, "Actually, I have 2 other great warriors in mind that will be a great help for us. But that's only possible if you and the human sovereign are willing to cooperate." "What do you mean?" The snake goddess's eyes flashed with intrigue. Zen clearly understood what kind of opponents were about to attack the Pear Hill. Only those at the eternal realm and above would be able to help them. "I'm talking about the human sovereign and you," Zen said straightforwardly. Fuxi wasn't able to figure out right away what Zen meant, but the snake goddess understood it instantly. The Oneness Sky Palace didn't really rely on Zen's strength to resist the Sun Crow race's invasion before. But it became possible because of the real Eastern Emperor Tai that was inside Zen's body. Although the real Eastern Emperor Tai was only a wisp of energy soul, he could still exert his bloodline power to an extreme extent. Therefore, during the previous battle, his strength far exceeded the power of Emperor Charm. The snake goddess had already known that she and Fuxi were only avatars that possessed their own consciousness. So you mean that my real self and the real Fuxi will take control of our bodies, right? The snake goddess asked Zen. That's your idea? Fuxi frowned as he looked at Zen. Zen nodded and answered, yes. In fact, when Zen was still on his way back, he had already discussed this matter with the primeval Lord of Heaven. In the case of Eastern Emperor Tai, he couldn't resist the invasion of his real self because he hadn't woken up yet. But for the snake goddess and Fuxi, the situation was different. They had their own consciousness in the source world. Thus it wasn't appropriate for them to sacrifice their bodies to their real counterparts. Zen bore this in mind, and tried to be very careful when he proposed it. He had already expected that they might oppose the idea, so it wasn't a surprise when Fuxi showed expressions of antipathy. But he became hopeful when he saw that the snake goddess fell silent and sincerely thought about it. Currently, in addition to asking Gerald to summon the other two Chaos Ancient Gods, the snake goddess also tried to persuade other super forces, which had Eternal Realm warriors, to their side. The ear mice and even the separate abyss race were included. Previously, these super forces tended to play it safe. On one hand, they were afraid of the Bearing race and the Divine Farmer race. They even hoped that the Element Spirit race could take care of them on the other shore. On the other hand, they also didn't agree with the Purge way. Now was the time for these super forces to make their own choice. After thinking for quite some time, the snake goddess gave a serious look at Zen and said, I want to talk to my real self. Zen nodded and looked at Fuxi. However, Fuxi just waved his hand and said, leave me alone. I won't allow anyone to control me, not even that guy. Back when the snake goddess and Fuxi knew that they were just avatars, they felt very disappointed. The news came as quite a shock for both of them. Fuxi had always been conceited and prideful. That was why it was difficult for him to accept Zen's proposal. Since Zen didn't have the authority to impose, he respected Fuxi's decision. After that, Zen communicated with the real snake goddess, and her energy soul floated out. As the cloud cover array was activated, the light in the Pear Hill became much dimmer under the thick clouds. 3 days later, at exact noontime, a huge crack suddenly appeared in the clouds, and the sunlight poured in. Everyone in the Pear Hill turned their heads and gazed into the sky. On the huge crack where the rays of sunlight were shining in, a huge shadow suddenly descended from it. The creature was so huge and looked like a bradypod. It turned out that it was one of the Chaos Ancient Gods, Judson. Among the 6 Chaos Ancient Gods, it was said that Judson was the most discreet one. Even back in the era when the Chaos Ancient Gods had the most intense conflicts and disputes, he had only appeared and attacked twice. Splash! Judson's body quickly shrank as he landed beside a pool in the Pear Hill. At the same time, Gerald was there to meet with Judson. His body also shrank a lot. Most of his body was soaked in the pool, and only his head and his poisonous tail were exposed. So where's the guy that you're talking about? I want to meet him, Judson said outright. Gerald mentioned Zen when he was trying to recruit Judson on their side. Since Judson didn't know Zen, he found Gerald's stories about him quite inconceivable. Eventually, Gerald called Zen over to meet Judson. As soon as Zen climbed to the pool, he saw a bradypod-like creature wave his hand at him. At the same moment, he felt a strange wave of spiritual energy rush towards him. In an instant, an illusory world surrounded and enveloped him. Inside the illusory world, there was no way to know if it was day or night. There were mazes everywhere and the atmosphere was disharmonious. A spiritual attack. Zen suddenly became vigilant. He perceived that the world he was in was obviously a spiritual illusion. Although his soul had already reached the Holy Soul Realm, had 9 Holy Soul imprints and was much stronger than those of ordinary Eternal Realm warriors, it still wasn't easy for him to break free from Judson's truth level 30 using the strength of his Holy Soul alone. Don't you think you oversold this guy? Judson said to Gerald as he shook his head in disappointment. With all that he heard about Zen, he thought that Zen should be able to easily break free from the illusion that he made. However, just seconds after, Judson felt unusual vitality burst out from Zen's body. It was supposed to be a kind of soul aura, but he was sure that it came from Zen's body. While Judson was still confused, he suddenly widened his eyes and felt that the illusion he had created began to collapse. Before he could understand what was going on, the illusory world was completely destroyed by Zen. Chapter 3487, The Black Pages. The spiritual attack that Judson launched relied on the soul. It was energy in essence. The abilities of the spiritual level in the ancestry level bloodline were mostly gathered in the area symbolizing life. The moment the illusory world enveloped Zen's body, the ancestry level bloodline started to react. Zen felt a chill rushing up from his back and integrating into his soul. In the blink of an eye, the huge world was broken. Judson stared at Zen with amazement. "The person you chose is really extraordinary, Gerald," he said just before blotting out the expression on his face. Gerald took a slight glance at Judson. A moment ago, Judson thought he oversold Zen, but now his attitude changed. Gerald floated out of the pool. "Zen, this is another Chaos Ancient God, Judson," he said. He motioned to Zen to come closer for an introduction. "Master Judson," Zen greeted Judson politely, cupping his hands towards him. It seemed that the spiritual attack Judson had launched was just a test for him. "You really are an exceptional young man," said Judson as he narrowed his eyes, appearing as if he expected highly of him. "The bloodline you have been infused must be the origin level bloodline. It happens to be the bloodline that can resist the soul attack, right?" If the origin level bloodline that Zen obtained could strengthen his soul, then it made sense that he was able to easily resist Judson's attack. Gerald chuckled. "Judson, you can try another way," he suggested. Judson felt strange about Gerald's request, but he did as he was told. He stretched out his claw towards Zen's head, and an indefectible glazed goblet appeared out of nowhere. It flew towards Zen, trapping him with no escape. Strong energy engulfed the entirety of the goblet. It was obviously not an ordinary object. Whoosh! As the energy surged inside the goblet, Zen felt a great debilitating pressure running through his veins and across his body. If his cultivation base was lower than the eternal realm, the energy could have crushed him. Zen stretched out his finger and lightly tapped the transparent wall, digging a small hole. Whoosh! The great pressure in the goblet was unleashed from the hole, forming an energy sword. The impact of the pressure then shot the sword towards the pool. Splash! The calm waters of the pool began to ripple from the aura of the energy sword. Zen looked at Judson with questioning eyes. He broke the goblet only with a single tap. His strength was evident. Judson was introverted. However, he was also competitive. "I don't plan on losing to you," he thought to himself. The truth level energy from his claw sword, combining with the energy from the glazed goblet. A blinding blue light was emitted. Realizing that Judson was unwilling to admit defeat, Zen stretched out his hands and scratched the goblet wall even more vigorously. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The goblet started to disintegrate from more holes made by Zen's move. It couldn't bear Zen's strength any longer and finally broke into pieces. Well, Judson was rendered speechless. "If I remember correctly, this heavenly glazed goblet is the strongest thing you have ever made," Gerald said with a smirk. "It used to be," Judson replied. "But now it's not." Among the 6 Chaos Ancient Gods, Judson possessed the creation truth, the only way that chaotic energy was transformed into any kind of material. It was similar to the truth of 3 energy construction. However, the creation theurgy which used the power of truth was naturally much stronger than the truth of 3 energy construction. Not only could Zen easily break free from Judson's spiritual attack, but he was also able to destroy the heavenly glazed goblet effortlessly. Such methods were inconceivable for Judson. In fact, Gerald did not invite Zen to show off his strength. Judson, Kendrick, and Gerald did not support the Snake Goddess and Fuxi. Their gathering in the Pear Hill was because they advocated the finale way, and they had always hoped to complete it. And now, Zen was the only one who could complete it. Judson had come all the way to meet Zen. Now Zen's performance was beyond Judson's expectations, which confirmed that his trip wasn't rather useless. At least, he would firmly stand by the Pear Hill's side. After leaving the pool where Gerald was located, Zen had to go to the deleting space. On the one hand, Letitia had asked about Jeffrey's current situation, and on the other hand, Zia would be a great help in the oncoming battle. Zen tried to activate the truth of 3 energy construction. He was about to enter the deleting space when he felt a force of resistance. He was actually being rejected by the deleting space. He had entered the deleting space for several times, but this had never happened before. What happened? He pondered. Zen couldn't help but have a bad feeling. He was wondering and confused at the same time. After trying and failing for several times, his face darkened. The primeval Lord of Heaven suddenly spoke, "Don't worry. The change in the deleting space might have something to do with Othniel. Othniel had also participated in the battle this time. It was Othniel's theurgy to delete the space into the deleting space. It was most likely that Othniel had discovered the secret of the deleting space, so Zia might have done something to protect it. The primeval Lord of Heaven was smart. His guess could somehow be close to the truth. That makes sense. Zen nodded as he was feeling a little relieved. It was a risk to place Jeffrey in the deleting space. However, it was his own choice as he was already an adult, but Zen did not intend to tell Letitia about this. While Zen was in deep thought about the mystery of the deleting space, Jeffrey and Zia were passing through a plane in the abstruse energy world. After a long and tiring journey, they reached a spot close to the 4 huge black pillars. A strange plain with big and small caves suddenly appeared in front of them. Could those caves be worlds? Jeffrey wondered as they walked towards them. He pulled Zia into one of the caves. They explored the inside and found that he guessed right. The worlds were similar to the chaos. There were independent spaces within, which were not as vast as the worlds they knew. They were much smaller. Just as before, dead silence filled the caves. No living being thrived as there was no evidence of life. Jeffrey had given up exploring and moved towards the 4 giant pillars. At the end of the plain was the nearest black pillar. After passing through each round cave on the seemingly unending plain, Jeffrey finally saw the huge pillar in front of him. The pillar seemed to be formed by numerous pages of book. The thick and huge pages were placed in a spiral, forming an upward stair. Walking to the side of the pillar, Jeffrey reached out his hand and touched a black page. To his surprise, his hand felt that it was not made of paper, but of solid stone. He blinked his eyes in disbelief and proceeded to step on a stair. Buzz! The moment he stepped on the stair, a light orange thread appeared and flew into the distant sky. Jeffrey frowned and looked at the thread, confused. It seemed that the thread was headed to the direction of the chaos. Chapter 3488, Changing the Location. Jeffrey took a good, long look at the thread but still couldn't figure out its use. Just as he was about to reach for it in an attempt to pull it closer, a scene flashed in front of his eyes. He saw a golden beach, picturesque and beautiful, with the cold seawater that constantly surged at the edges. His pupils contracted as he took in the sight. Is this the sea of truth? He muttered to himself. He traced the length of the thread and discovered that it was connected to a grain of sand on the beach. He found himself filled with awe and confusion. Could it be that such a long thread connects to a single grain of sand? He then remembered Zia told him that the energy of all other shore tokens came from the abstruse energy world. Jeffrey asked him how exactly the energy was transmitted, but Zia couldn't answer. After all, it wasn't a subject Zia dabbled in. The concept of space in the abstruse energy world was completely different from that of the chaos. Now Jeffrey perceived this thread was very long, but in fact, it might not be necessarily true. A grain of sand connects to a thread. If that is the case, then... As he was thinking, he took a step forward and onto the second stair. He was now on the second page and suddenly, dozens of threads appeared. Jeffrey reached out for the threads and saw every single scene at the end of each one. Sand, 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 and sand. It was as he had predicted. Each thread connected to a grain of sand on that golden beach. The threads grew in number but the scene stayed almost exactly the same. Upon the realization that the pages at the bottom might just contain endless sand, Jeffrey decided to draw Zia and climb up the stairs. The spiral staircase formed out of the pages. The further he went, the greater the number of threads that appeared was. Each time he passed by a page, Jeffrey would reach out just to check and found each page was full of sand. Just as he thought that maybe there was nothing else to see, he finally came upon a new discovery. He had arrived on the 10th page and found that the thread connected to a grain of sand, much like the others, except this particular grain was fused with a creature that had just reached the other shore realm. This grain of sand was not on the beach but in a round inner world. The sand was the lowest level other shore token and contained less than 1 divine megaton of power. Only a fool would choose to fuse themselves with the sand, yet Jeffrey was encountering such a fool. He was practically speechless and spent quite a while just staring. After his shock receded, Jeffrey decided to continue his ascent. 10 pages, 20 pages, 30. After a while, Jeffrey soon climbed a certain height. The higher he went, the more threads the pages released. After he reached the 30th page, tens of thousands of light threads emanated from the page. On the 80th page, he was finally able to leave the area of sand as stones began to make an appearance. This should be within stage 1 of the other shore. The power offered by the other shore tokens in stage 1 is very weak, Jeffrey remarked. He wanted to communicate with Zia, but there was no way Zia was going to hear him. He could only rely on himself to judge the things he saw. The items connected to the light threads were arranged by size, from smallest to largest, and there were also a few precious other shore tokens strewn about, hidden in rooms of various shapes and styles. Jeffrey could only look at them in wonder. The rooms on the other shore. The other shore tokens in the temples. He did not know much about the other shore and had to think for a while in order to understand. After entering the other shore, most Source World creatures made it their goal to explore the temples in the hopes of obtaining a decent other shore token. From here on out, the other ends of the threads connected to multiple inner worlds. It seems that the size and shape of the other shore tokens don't really matter, he muttered thoughtfully. What matters is the place to which the threads connect. He was a thoughtful young man, and as he continued to climb, he could judge the strength of the other shore tokens with just a few details and observations. The other shore tokens that connected to the outermost threads of the page were often ordinary, while those connecting to the inner ones were more precious. A bold idea then came to Jeffrey's mind. If I change the position of the thread, will the other shore token's nature also change? He thought to himself. Eager to test his idea out, Jeffrey quickly made his way to the edge of the page. After a bit of careful investigation, he found that the root of the thread was a thumb-sized, square stone embedded on the page. Jeffrey reached out and tried to dig out this stone. To his amazement, it came loose. It's movable. Just as he dug out the square stone, the thread that connected to the far distance also disappeared. At the same time, in an empty corner of stage 2 of the other shore, the huge 3-layer stone suddenly lost its luster. Everything on the other shore, save for the soul pill, soul crystal, and a few other specific things, contained energy. When Jeffrey took out the stone, he inevitably cut off the thread that connected to the 3-layer stone and turned it into an ordinary rock. It was no longer another shore token. Afterwards, Jeffrey walked to the inner side of the page and found a large number of black pits of the same size there. Without any hesitation, he stuffed the stone into one of those pits. Click! The moment the stone was fitted onto the slot, the thread once again appeared and extended onto the other shore. Once again, the 3-layer stone's surface lit up, this time with red-orange light. The amount of power contained within the stone also rose by more than 10 times. 2 horse-faced creatures that resided in stage 2 sensed the powerful aura that was suddenly released from the distance. What in the world happened over there? These 2 were from the Triumph race, a very small group of horse-faced creatures in the Source World. They had no might nor any fame to their name. They had stayed in stage 2 of the other shore all this time because their souls of light were nowhere near strong enough to reach the higher stage. The 2 of them made the trek towards the 3-layer stone and could not contain their amazement when they reached their destination. Shouldn't a 3-layer stone normally contain only 2 or 3 divine megatons of power? Yeah, but why does this one seem to have dozens of divine megatons of power? I can feel its scorching aura. It seems to contain some sort of special fire ability. It's at the highest grade. Their hearts boiled with excitement. The 2 of them had spent so many years here in stage 2, but they suddenly came upon this strange other shore token that could reverse their fortune. Nobody would believe a single word they said about this incident. Meanwhile, Jeffrey, who had seen all of this unfold, felt a strange feeling in his heart. It was when he raised his head to look at the endless black column that he realized it was the overwhelming feeling of omnipotence. Chapter 3489, Trigger. The 4 massive pillars had some sort of a strict ruling in which every thread was not to be touched or moved. No one was allowed to change their positions without authorization. Anyone who broke the rule would have to face severe consequences. After Jeffrey moved one of the threads, at the end of the staircase, a statue suddenly came to life. Its eyes glowed a red light, and its body trembled slightly. Anyone. Fortunately for Jeffrey, this statue had been asleep for countless years and was practically a few steps away from disintegrating into a pile of dust. If this had taken place a while back, the statue would have leapt into action immediately, killing the intruders on the spot. However, it was way past its prime. Its stone body had practically melted into the ground it stood upon. Statues weren't supposed to rot, but this one did. In comparison, the 4 statues of the Eternal Divine Courtyard were much luckier. Because of the existence of the time lock, they were destined to continue in pristine condition, unlike the statue that angrily flashed its red eyes at Jeffrey. Crack, crack, crack. The statue felt the energy fluctuations coming from the pillar, and desperately tried to free its legs from the ground. However, it didn't take long before all its energy was used up, and its eyes quickly dimmed till it was lifeless once more. This whole time, Jeffrey didn't know what was going on above. Upon climbing to the 500th stair, he found that the threads of light here were connected to much more other shore tokens. Stretching out his hand, he lightly brushed some threads of light closest to him, and had visions pertaining to where the other shore tokens were located. "This inner world is full of fish," he cried in amusement, as the other shore tokens revealed to him many different inner worlds. "What a disgusting inner world. There is sticky blood everywhere. None of these looks enticing." Finally, Jeffrey found an inner world full of humans. This guy must be a human. Jeffrey didn't know whether the owner of this inner world was friend or foe, nor did he care. The only thing on his mind now was his insatiable curiosity with a hint of mischievousness. Without any hesitation, he dug out the square stone under the thread and inserted it into the first black pit on the inner side. Meanwhile, in the Rose sect of Pear Hill, the sect leader Emily was leading over 100 disciples to cultivate a unique cultivation method. Before, Zen had given enough chaotic source spirits to Emily. With those spirits, she might be the last one to reach the chaotic source realm. Additionally, she was the one who helped bring Yan and Zen into the source world, so she was trained with utmost priority by the Pear Hill. Now, the Rose sect was the most popular among the small sects of the Pear Hill. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that it wouldn't be long before it became a powerful sect, and Emily would be promoted to the grand sect leader. Ah, just then, a beautiful female disciple who had been following Emily shrieked. The other disciples whipped their heads to see where the scream came from, only to find the female disciple trembling slightly, her face as pale as a ghost. Emily frowned. "What's wrong?" The female disciple sat there in shock, but answered Emily obediently, "My other shore token seems to have been destroyed." This disciple had just entered stage 4, and her other shore token was very ordinary. However, Emily just so happened to be fond of her. Sooner or later, Emily was willing to help her obtain a powerful other shore token. Destroyed. Emily's frown deepened. She too was stunned. The female disciple felt the gaze of the other disciples. Afraid that no one believed her, she summoned her other shore token, a white stone flower. The stone flower looked pretty ordinary, as though it was a simple decorative paperweight. No energy fluctuations seemed to be pulsating within it. Is this other shore token really broken? It doesn't look like its energy has been depleted. How about replenishing it with the divine crystals? The other female disciples of the Rose sect broke into an uproar. Even the other shore token that had used up all its energy would have reacted. This stone flower truly seemed to be an ordinary object. On the other shore, everything had energy. It was almost impossible to find something devoid of it. Emily's brows furrowed in confusion. She had never encountered such a situation. Buzz! The stone flower suddenly shook violently in the disciple's hand. A cold aura gushed out from it and enshrouded the entire hall. It seemed the other shore token had been strengthened by at least 20 times in such a short time. The female disciple grunted confusedly, and even Emily was surprised. They had never seen other shore tokens become stronger in this way. Back on the massive pillar, after Jeffrey once again changed the location of a thread, another strand of energy surged out from within the pillar. At the end of the staircase with 1,000 pages, the eyes of the broken statue flickered once more, this time with an even brighter red light. Crack, 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 the statue finally managed to break free from its pedestal and took a step forward. "Anyone who dares to break in will be killed," it explained, finally able to complete the sentence it was trying to utter earlier. This statue was designed to protect the huge pillar. Once untethered, the statue was actually quite nimble. It rushed down the stairs speedily. Crack, crack, crack. Of course, the sound of the statue running caught Jeffrey's attention. As the statue closed in on its target, Jeffrey felt a sense of dread welling up within him. Standing at the edge of the staircase, he looked up towards the clamoring sound. Only then did he see the tattered statue rushing down the stairs. Instantly, Jeffrey realized that the statue was aiming for him. Not wanting to fight the statue, Jeffrey abruptly turned and ran down the stairs. However, the statue really was incredibly fast. In just a few moments, the distance between the two closed quickly. Jeffrey was somewhat slow because Zia was behind him. Seeing there was no outrunning this statue, Jeffrey whipped around to make Zia face the statue. Urgently, he patted Zia on his right shoulder. All Zia could see were the dense light dots in front of him. He knew that Jeffrey had climbed up the pillar. Without the slightest hesitation, he reached out to slap whatever was in front of him. Boom! Normally, creatures in the abstruse energy world wouldn't stand a chance against Zia's palm attack. However, the statue on the pillar was by no means ordinary. Even a blow from Zia just caused it to shake its head in a daze for a moment, but it quickly recovered. Dang it! When Jeffrey saw this scene, his eyes widened in fear. Zia was probably no match for the statue, at least not in this form. In a rush, he grabbed Zia's hand and yanked him towards the edge of the stair. Together, they jumped off the pillar and plummeted to the ground. Boom! Upon landing on the ground, Jeffrey immediately jumped up and helped Zia up as well. Zia was confused. How did they fall? He didn't recall feeling any sort of impact from the statue's counterattack. However, when he stood up, he positioned his hands, ready to strike again. To his surprise, he felt Jeffrey yanking at the rope. No matter what happened, he had to follow Jeffrey, so he didn't have the time to try attacking again and decided to follow Jeffrey. The statue was not going to let Jeffrey go. Muttering something under its breath, the statue quickly spiraled down the stairs. As they ran, Jeffrey kept one eye on the pillar behind him. Then, he narrowed his eyes ruthlessly. If he couldn't deal with the statue here, he would have to lead it into the real world. Chapter 3490, The Strength of the Statue. The nearest cave on the plain was only a few hundred feet away. With a few strides, Jeffrey arrived in an instant and went in. The caves on the plain seemed to be empty, but each one had a very unique and terrifying interior. There was one which was filled with corrosive liquids, another containing poisonous gases floating within, and another one with a scorching hot interior as if a sun was stored in it. Closely behind, a statue was chasing after him at an incredible speed. Before he knew it, the statue was just about 10 feet away from him. Without any hesitation, he jumped into the nearest cave, dragging Zia along. Whoosh! The statue's goal was to hunt down the intruders. Even after Jeffrey successfully left the pillar, the statue still chased after him and was determined to kill him. As Jeffrey and Zia jumped in, the statue followed them. Buzz! Buzz! Thousands of light dots, like a torrential rain, drilled into the cave below. The two quickly turned into their normal forms, as they continued to fall into the cave. Zia instantly analyzed their situation, quickly grabbed the rope around his waist, and pulled Jeffrey towards him. Just as he steadied himself, a whistling sound came from above. He saw that the statue stretched out its big hand and tried to grab his head. The statues on the pillars didn't possess extraordinary abilities. However, their bodies were extremely sturdy, and their movements were incredibly fast. With just brute strength and speed to rely on, they still couldn't be underestimated. Zia knew that if the statue got a hold of his head, it would be crushed easily. Fortunately, he was a smart man. He never took his opponents lightly and was always alert at his surroundings. He instantly realized that the statue was not easy to deal with. With his quick reflexes, he drew his head back, and the statue missed. At the same time, he did not waste the opportunity for a counterattack. With a wave of his hand, a golden whip shadow shot towards the statue. Boom! The moment the god-lashing whip touched the statue, a deafening explosion resounded. It was so loud that Jeffrey couldn't help covering his ears as he shouted in pain. Blood started dripping to his fingers that were covering his ears. Zia immediately saw Jeffrey's condition, so he reached out his hand, grabbed him, and stuffed him into the space channel. Now, he could focus on dealing with the statue with no restraint. The power within his body quickly surged towards the god-lashing whip. To his surprise, the statue managed to withstand his attack. Never had he seen such a solid statue before that couldn't be destroyed by his mighty whip. Death to the invaders! The statue regained its balance after being sent away with the impact caused by the god-lashing whip. It rushed towards Zia again, but what waited for it were endless whip shadows. Golden whip shadows drew an arc of tens of thousands of feet from left to right. They lashed the statue at lightning speed, creating space ripples in rapid succession. In just a few seconds, Zia had cracked his whip for more than 1,000 times. The statue's speed became useless in the face of Zia's attacks. It could do nothing but rely on its sturdy body to withstand the strikes. Clap, crack, the loud sound of whipping reverberated throughout the entire cave. The more Zia attacked, the more he got surprised. He knew that the power of his whip was absolute. In the chaos, no matter how powerful his opponents were, there was no way that they could withstand such an astounding volume of attacks. The statue wasn't even a special being, but it could actually endure an all-out attack for a long time. What material is this statue made of? Zia was getting impatient. Clap, crack, Zia continued his furious attacks. Soon, he noticed that the statue was already showing signs of collapse. Eventually, one of its arms got destroyed. Soon, the other arm, legs, torso, and the head were also torn apart by the golden whip shadows. Zia was relieved as he defeated the seemingly indestructible statue. He then grabbed the air and released Jeffrey from the space channel. While he was treating Jeffrey's wounds, he asked with a serious expression, "Did that statue run down from one of the 4 pillars?" Yes, Jeffrey answered as he stared at the remains of the statue that were now nothing but scraps of metal. He knew that the statue was indeed powerful since Zia took quite some time before he could destroy it. Did it attack you as you climbed up the pillar? Zia asked. Since he was not aware of the passage of time in the abstruse energy world, he didn't know how long Jeffrey had stayed on the pillar. Actually, no, Jeffrey shook his head while his brows were furrowed. I'm thinking maybe it attacked because I moved something that I shouldn't, he continued. Wait, what do you mean? What was on the pillar? Zia asked curiously. Then Jeffrey told him about the pages and the threads of light on the pillar. What are you saying? The threads of light here are connected to the other shore. Zia was so shocked that his mouth remained wide open. There were actually several various theories about the other shore. One of the most popular ones was that its energy was flowing and coming from the abstruse energy world. Right at this moment, Zia finally confirmed this theory. There were a lot of things that entered his mind as he discovered this secret. He was kind of trembling and was pacing back and forth. With this discovery, it meant that all the powerful, sacred, and terrifying forces on the other shore actually relied on the 4 huge pillars. Furthermore, it seemed that the situation on the other shore of the other worlds was just the same. In Zia's mind, he couldn't help but think that the 4 pillars might be the origin of everything. He was even more puzzled when he heard Jeffrey saying that the positions of the threads of light and the nature of the other shore tokens could be changed at will. I remember it clearly. The statue didn't make a move the first time I made changes, but when I did it for the second time, the statue chased after me. I guess there's more than one statue on the pillars, Jeffrey explained. He thought that he could just do whatever he wanted, but it turned out that it wasn't that simple. Upon seeing his sullen face, Zia smiled and said, "You can go to the pillar again and lure the other statues down." Zia clearly knew about the function of the 4 pillars, so he didn't want this opportunity to slip by. "You want me to lure them down? But what if I can't escape?" Jeffrey said in a trembling voice. The first statue was shabby, and its intellect wasn't so high. If Jeffrey encountered a statue that possessed a high level of intelligence, it might be difficult for him to escape. "Don't worry, just deal with them the same way as you did with the first one." Zia stretched out his hand, and the truth of 3 energy construction began to operate. The rope that tied him and Jeffrey continued to lengthen. The plan was Zia would stay behind while Jeffrey returned to the pillars. If something unexpected should happen, he could tell Zia immediately through the rope so that he could pull him back instantly. Meanwhile, on the dark haze peak of the Pear Hill, a droplet of blood dripped from the wound on Zen's fingertip. The droplet of extremely thick ancestry-level blood fell into a clear pool. As it splashed into the water, the blood continued to sink without dispersing. Suddenly, the droplet of blood stopped sinking, jumped out of the pool, and rushed back towards the wound on Zen's finger. Like a small red bug, Zen flicked the droplet back into the pool. It splashed into the pool again. This time, it wandered around the pool and sank into the bottom. Immediately after, the temperature within the entire pool rapidly rose. Due to intense heat, a thick white mist began springing up. Soon after, the clear water in the pool had completely evaporated. Chapter 3491, The Problem of the Ancestry-Level Bloodline. The Dark Haze Peak was a place of cultivation in the Pear Hill. The pool looked small, but was in fact 10,000 feet deep. A drop of the ancestry-level blood could instantly cause the water in the pool to evaporate. The heat emanating off of it was not to be underestimated. Whoosh! The blood at the bottom of the pool began to lengthen before Zen's eyes. It was 10 feet long before it stopped. It then drilled into the Dark Haze Peak. Crack, 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 cracks sounded from within the peak as the blood began to cut the peak. It had gone rogue just because Zen hadn't accepted it. And at the rate it was going, it looked like it was threatening Zen by saying that it would destroy everything if he didn't accept it. Alas, Zen was rendered speechless. He was no longer treating it as a drop of blood, but as a living being. A while later, a neat cut appeared on one side of the Dark Haze Peak. If given enough time, this drop of blood could hack the Dark Haze Peak to dust. Zen had no choice but to stretch out his right hand, in order to summon it back. He then felt a strange fluctuation of the ancestry-level bloodline in his body, as if it was releasing a signal to make that drop of blood return to him. That drop of blood seemed to have ears. At the summons from the bloodline in Zen's body, it quickly rushed back and drilled into his finger. Zen had originally planned to accept this drop of blood, but his face darkened as he felt the difference of the ancestry-level bloodline in his body. He flicked his finger once again, sending the drop of blood flying outwards. How could he allow his blood to master his own body? He had already sensed back in the square that the process of his fusion with the bloodline was slightly different from that of others. According to the primeval Lord of Heaven, once the bloodline was successfully absorbed, it would become a part of him. He might not be proficient in using the theurgy bestowed by the bloodline in the beginning, but he would become more and more skillful as time passed and with constant use. The bloodline was part of the body. It wouldn't cause trouble without reason. But the bloodline in Zen's body was acting strangely. He didn't know how to use the ancestry-level bloodline. When he had emerged from the eternal scroll painting, the ancestry-level bloodline had displayed several theurgies according to the situations on its own. In a nutshell, the ancestry-level bloodline was like a puppeteer while Zen was just a puppet. It was not easy to obtain the ancestry-level bloodline. But how could he become its puppet? Zen would not allow this to happen. The drop of blood suddenly changed form. It was only the size of a bean, but in this moment, it turned into a monster's head. It even had a mouth and a vocal organ and was wailing in protest. Zen felt his body spiral out of control. It felt like someone else was holding him in his body. He pounced towards the drop of blood, his body stiff. No matter how he tried to summon his strength and activate the other shore tokens, he was unable to change anything. He trembled and stretched out a hand to the drop of blood. The monster-like blood finally returned to normal. It got in through his fingertip. It was only then that the force that controlled his body disappeared and his body finally returned to normal. Once the violent conflict between the two forces disappeared, Zen felt pain in his body. He lost his strength and fell to the ground. He asked the primeval Lord of Heaven while panting, "This blood?" The primeval Lord of Heaven was also rendered speechless. He had felt that something was wrong when the ancestry-level bloodline began to make all sorts of responses. Since the ancestry-level bloodline was extraordinary and beyond his realm of knowledge, he thought that perhaps this was its own ability and didn't think further about it. But now, it seemed that the ancestry-level bloodline had its own consciousness and was about to disobey every one of Zen's orders. "Perhaps you haven't really refined the ancestry-level bloodline yet," the primeval Lord of Heaven said. He was worried, now that he knew the background of the ancestry-level bloodline in the eternal divine courtyard. An origin-level bloodline alone was extremely powerful. What would the ancestry-level bloodline that no one had ever completely obtained be like? Zen also realized the seriousness of the problem. What should we do? It was true that the bloodline was powerful, but it wouldn't be worth it if he became a puppet of this bloodline. You must find a way to refine it and erase its consciousness. "Let me help you," the primeval Lord of Heaven said. Zen didn't know how intelligent the ancestry-level bloodline was, so he didn't say anything. He merely sat cross-legged and conjured an incarnation in his inner world. Fortunately, there were still a lot of forces that Zen could rely on in his inner world. Under the arrangements that the primeval Lord of Heaven, the snake goddess, and the others had made, a red net array was formed in Zen's inner world. Zen had to refine the ancestry-level bloodline completely to erase its consciousness. A full 6 days passed in his inner world. When, in his excitement, he moved the net array out of his elixir field and activated it, the bloodline in his body began to fluctuate. The net array collapsed and disappeared without a trace. Zen, the primeval Lord of Heaven, the snake goddess, and the other human heroes were dumbstruck. "It has been eroded by a completely opposite energy," the snake goddess said awkwardly. "Things aren't as simple as we think," the primeval Lord of Heaven said, shaking his head. The ancestry-level bloodline could dissolve any kind of energy, and Zen probably wouldn't be able to refine it by himself. "It looks like we'll have to turn to external forces." "External forces?" Zen repeated thoughtfully. "You mean Gerald's power?" "Yes," the primeval Lord of Heaven said, nodding. "Gerald had mastered the life truth, while Judson had mastered the creation truth." Zen didn't hesitate. Now that he was facing a formidable enemy, a war would break out at any time. And before that happened, he had to solve this hidden trouble in his body. Gerald was trustworthy. Zen went to visit Gerald and told him about the bloodline. Gerald was surprised at the weirdness of the story but thought it was understandable. The bloodline that Zen had obtained was too powerful. As the Son of Truth who was in charge of the life truth, Gerald was familiar with bloodlines. He thought for a while before turning towards Zen and taking action. He punctured Zen's back. When the truth energy was injected into his body, it disappeared without a trace, just like the net array. Although Gerald knew the characteristics of Zen's bloodline, he was still a little unconvinced. He didn't believe that he couldn't suppress the bloodline. The truth energy was again infused and dispersed into Zen's body. Gerald became tired but the ancestry-level bloodline in Zen's body remained the same. The bloodline remained unaffected, seemingly invincible. Chapter 3492, Gathering. Despite having spent so much effort, Gerald had failed to suppress the bloodline within Zen's body. It was rather embarrassing. All he knew was that Zen had fused with a powerful bloodline, but he couldn't tell the bloodline's grade or rank in the eternal scroll painting, and Zen hadn't given him all the information. The power of the bloodline is simply inconceivable. After a moment of being awestruck, Gerald insisted on giving it another go. "I'll call Judson over to help." From the looks of it, it seemed he wouldn't stop until he managed to help Zen suppress his bloodline. After hearing what Gerald asked him to do, Judson also showed great interest. It was because of their special bloodlines that the Chaos Ancient Gods were all-powerful. Naturally, they were highly concerned about other unique and powerful bloodlines as well. Once Judson came over, he discussed the matter with Gerald. The two then worked together to suppress Zen's bloodline, but with disappointing results. The ancestry-level bloodline remained at the top in terms of energy level, and it could work out energy that restrained the enemy's energy, accomplishing a great task with little effort by clever maneuvers. Although they tried both the internal and external forces, neither of them worked. This time around, even the primeval Lord of Heaven didn't know what to do with it. "When I first entered the Supreme Pure Realm, I encountered over 100 crises. Sometimes, even after trying every single available means, I still couldn't overcome certain obstacles," said the primeval Lord of Heaven. "But at the time, I didn't complain. It was my first time entering the Supreme Pure Realm. Everything was so strange. I needed to explore it all step by step, even fighting with my life. Entering a strange domain meant coming across more unknown difficulties and dangers, but he also gained much from it." Zen's ancestry-level bloodline was truly powerful. No one in even the Four Spirits sect had obtained the complete ancestry-level bloodline. This, unknown, served as a great test for Zen, as well as a great opportunity. As for how to control the ancestry-level bloodline, all he could do was explore step by step. After returning to the Dark Haze Peak, Zen tried communicating with the ancestry-level bloodline to see if there was any turn of events. In the Victory Province beside the Pear Hill were many black ships in a row. The black ship's captain stood at the bow along with the Grand Master of Heaven, followed by the other members of the black ship. All of them wore serious expressions. "Will Othniel play tricks?" the captain asked uneasily. The pair had made a vow through the contract restricting twin-headed snake. According to the vow, Othniel wouldn't attack the Grand Master of Heaven before they took down the Pear Hill. Instead, their agreement entailed they would attack the Pear Hill together. But as the Grand Master of Heaven just arrived with the black ship members in the Victory Province, Judson, another Chaos Ancient God, had also arrived at the Pear Hill. Even with two Chaos Ancient Gods guarding the Pear Hill, the Grand Master of Heaven had still decided to make a move until Othniel stopped him. According to the latter, the Pear Hill likely had an extremely powerful trump card. Now that it had the two Chaos Ancient Gods supporting them, he was afraid they'd suffer losses if they acted too rashly. At this point, he had already summoned another couple of Chaos Ancient Gods for help, Herbert and Lamont. The three Chaos Ancient Gods followed the Purge Way, meaning they remained on the Element Spirit race's side. The three of them gathering meant a great threat to the Nihility race. Even the Grand Master of Heaven would find it difficult to deal with them. It was rather worrying. As Othniel called for help, the Pear Hill also called for strong reinforcements. In the past couple of days, the captain of the black ship already felt a few strong space fluctuations. It was obvious that some powerful warriors had arrived at the Pear Hill through space channels. Among the three parties, they were the only ones lacking strong reinforcements. The longer they waited, the greater their disadvantage was. Meanwhile, the Grand Master of Heaven seemed very calm, even a little relaxed. "The conflict between them is greater," said the Grand Master of Heaven. "There is no need for us to rush along and steal the show." A battle was inevitable between those who believed in the Purge Way and those who believed in the Finale Way. These opposing forces produced the greatest conflict in the Source World. Initially, the Grand Master of Heaven descended to the Source World in quite a hurry, but he finally figured things out. The Nihility race didn't need to be all that anxious about a fight. While they kept their voices low in the conversation, the evil god was near enough to pick it up. They hadn't considered having to hide anything from him. The evil god seemed focused on finding the tentacle, indifferent to anything else. But behind his demeanor, he had his own plans. And he decided it was likely the best time to carry them out. Everything worked to his advantage now. He had completely got rid of Zen's control and he had devoured Usman. Moreover, he had the chance to take advantage of the Nihility race. It was his goal to grow stronger in the shortest time possible before finding the perfect opportunity to control everything there, including this powerful being. The evil god gazed at the Grand Master of Heaven from behind, malice filling his eyes. In the Taoism province, west of the Pear Hill. The Taoism province was very close to the Pear Hill and was ruled by the Pear Hill. Many humans lived across the area. It had countries, cities, and villages. The people of the Taoism province raised their heads to look up at the sky. In the boundless blue, they found a twisted silhouette, as though someone had twisted the very sky into a pretzel. While there was nothing concrete, so long as they looked up, they could feel the pressure. If someone used grand teleportation to get into the space channel for observation, they'd find an enormous body nearly 10 million feet high hidden within. It was Othniel hiding in there. His means of hiding wasn't anything impressive, but he never intended to hide well in the first place. Herbert and Lamont both rushed over. The moment either of them arrived, Othniel would make a move. While waiting, Othniel also contacted the Divine Farmer to ask for the necessary support from the Element Spirit race. The latter delivered the Element Spirit race's message, telling him that they would take action at the most critical moment. But Othniel could sense the bitterness in the Divine Farmer's tone. While Claire had previously been killed by Gerald's poison of decomposition, she hadn't truly died. But it affected Yellow Thirk, nearly killing him. If the Element Spirit race still wanted to directly participate in the war, the Divine Farmer himself was going to be the next victim. It was definitely not something the Divine Farmer was willing to see. But at this point, he had no choice. Buzz. A strangely shaped cage suddenly appeared in the air above the Taoism province. Its structure was truly exquisite, like a well-crafted artwork. A space fluctuation emerged from it before a great figure appeared. It was none other than Herbert, one of the Chaos Ancient Gods. He had no intention to hide his arrival whatsoever. When his great body left the cage, his aura spread in all directions like an invisible storm, wandering throughout the entire Taoism province. The aura contained a form of truth energy that could imprison everything. All the living beings in the entire province were suppressed, left unable to breathe. This day arrived earlier than I expected, Herbert said slowly. His stand was not as firm as Lamont's or Othniel's. For so long, he had Fuxi trapped, giving him the chance to persuade him to change side, but the latter failed. Chapter 3493, Yan's Golden Dress. Herbert was the most gentle among the 6 Chaos Ancient Gods. However, he had chosen the Purge way because, on behalf of the Element Spirit race, the Yellow Thirk had promised him that the chaos would exist forever. Herbert didn't care much for his own life, but the Yellow Thirch's words piqued his interest. In the previous round of chaos, most of his clansmen had perished when the finale way was being executed. Even his one true love didn't make it out alive. This was one of the main reasons why he wasn't swayed by Fuxi. In Herbert's eyes, Fuxi indeed had a great talent, but there was almost no possibility of him completing the finale way. When the end comes, we won't stand a chance, said Othniel gravely. Once the chaos reached a certain extent, the needle would emerge. The people who advocated the Purge way now needed to eliminate anyone who was obsessed with the finale way, and then lastly, they needed to exterminate all the other creatures in the source world. As a matter of fact, they had already started the process of extermination. Previously, Othniel played a big role in killing creatures in 300 provinces. Well, what are we waiting for? Herbert was already fully aware of the situation at hand, and had resigned himself to his fate. Thus, he saw no need to hesitate. Othniel nodded. Just then, a human flew towards them from the ground. He was a native of the Taoism province. He had once been to the Pear Hill for further study, and now his cultivation base was at the 9th stage of the Other Shore realm. Facing the huge figures before him, he surprisingly felt calm. Mustering up all his strength, he shouted at the 2 Chaos Ancient Gods, Great Chaos Ancient Gods. The chaos created you for the completion of the finale way, not the other way around. Most of the people who had acknowledged the finale way believed that the Chaos Ancient Gods should unite together. But in the end, things went awry. There was a great divide among the Chaos Ancient Gods. Othniel looked at the tiny human expressionlessly. A ray of light suddenly flashed in his huge eye, and the human found that he couldn't move, frozen in the air. Splash! With a crisp sound, the minuscule human shattered into countless pieces. Every fragment floated aimlessly in the space. Herbert frowned at his fellow Chaos Ancient God. As he pointed at the fragments, an invisible cage enveloped what once was the tiny human from the Taoism province. When the cage shrank, it skillfully pieced all the fragments together, restoring the human's original shape. His body was flawless and brought back to normal, but he had lost all his vitality in the process. I don't like too much chaos, Herbert commented under his breath. Othniel sneered disdainfully, restoring him consumes more energy, which leads to more chaos. Suddenly, a wave of incredibly powerful energy surged out of Othniel's body. The wave rippled all over the Taoism province, shaking the very core of the earth beneath it. Every building, mountain, river, and creature disintegrated into mounds of dust under the force of the vibration. Very few warriors at the other shore realm survived, but they were seriously injured. Othniel knew these creatures would be killed sooner or later. He had just sped up the process. He felt absolutely no pity for them. Herbert shook his head when he saw what Othniel had done. Stretching out his slender fingers, he gently waved his hands in the air. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Blue pillars rose from the cracked earth, one after another, forming a circle around the Pear Hill. These blue pillars continued to rise until they pierced the very skies. The Pear Hill was a prison now. Everything within it was doomed. From the other end of the province, the people of the Black Ship could see the pillars rising. Herbert has made his move, the captain of the Black Ship said with a nod. The Grand Master of Heaven's eyes were also fixed on the rising blue pillars. Now that the Pear Hill is being besieged, let's see how they will deal with it. He was always very calm. Although the Chaos Ancient Gods were difficult to deal with, he knew what he needed to do. The 6 truth-level Thurges had been thoroughly studied. For people like the Grand Master of Heaven, he was more afraid of the unknown than this. Therefore, Zen, despite looking like the weakest one of the lot, made him anxious. Previously, Zen had been able to control his fishing drum. Even now, the Grand Master of Heaven was still confused as to how he did it. He clenched his fists as he thought resolutely, I need to capture him. The moment the first blue pillar emerged from the earth, a huge vibration was transmitted into the Pear Hill, and the hill sounded the alarm. All the mountain leaders and sect leaders ordered their people to return to their positions. The snake goddess had already briefed them on what was to come when she summoned them. This was a life and death battle among top masters. Those at the Holy Soul realm were not qualified to join. But together, they could form one massive being using the cloud cover array. It was only through this that the Pear Hill would stand a chance against the Chaos Ancient Gods. At the top of the Pear Hill, a golden magic array floated in the air. Yan stood at the very center of it. From afar, the complex golden magic array resembled a long, flowing dress that shone brightly, covering her snake tail. Buzz! The golden array suddenly began to glow. At the same time, Yan activated the energy shaft. Let's begin, she said, her voice trembling slightly. There was a trace of nervousness in her eyes. She hadn't spoken very loudly, but as the words left her lips, they traveled with ease towards the bottom of the hill. Begin, 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 her voice echoed in the ears of every disciple of the Pear Hill. The Pear Hill took up almost the whole province. The people were arranged according to rank in strength. The ones closer to the top were the strongest, and conversely, those at the foot of the hill were slightly lower in rank. Of course, the grand leaders of mountains and sects were positioned near the top of the Pear Hill, whereas ordinary sect leaders and disciples were located on the mountainside. The cities built by province citizens and mortals were mostly at the foot of the Pear Hill. Upon hearing Yan's voice, the disciples sat cross-legged and channeled their strength into the golden arrays before them. Each small golden magic array was a branch. The branches converged into the 9 arteries, and the power of the 9 arteries finally converged into Yan's golden dress. As the energy surged along the golden magic arrays, the white clouds that shrouded the Pear Hill rumbled with activity. Woo! The power contained in the golden dress became terrifyingly strong. After a few moments, it had collected all the complex energy of the disciples of the Pear Hill. It was impossible to harness this much energy without the help of the energy shaft. Seeing how everyone was doing their part and sending energy her way, Yan gently touched the magic array with her fingers. The second her fingers connected with the magic array, the energy burst upwards and shot towards the energy shaft. With the guidance of the calculation civilization, her energy shaft had been greatly improved in a short period of time. However, the calculation civilization had also told her that this was still not the complete version of the energy shaft. If the expected energy shaft was actualized, wars would be completely eradicated. Such an energy shaft would bring infinite power and infinite strength. Raising her right hand resolutely, Yan pointed towards the blue pillars in the distance. Go, she cried. Obediently, the energy shaft above her head shot out a pale golden light, which rushed towards the blue pillars. Chapter 3494, A Game of Seesaw. These blue pillars were enough to seal the whole Pear Hill. Once they were formed, it would be difficult to break even if Gerald and Judson joined forces to try. As such, Herbert was very confident it was foolproof. However, just as the blue pillars were rising into the sky, a faint golden light shot towards them like a streak of lightning. As soon as he saw the golden light beam, Herbert gasped. He could feel the immense power contained in it. Spreading out his hands instinctively, he released truth energy from his palms and directed it towards the blue pillars. Then, the blue pillars were coated in a light blue film, which stabilized them. Boom! As soon as the pale golden light hit the blue pillars, it exploded violently. The once stable blue pillars immediately shook like toothpicks, and many even collapsed. Even Othniel was shocked when he felt the power of the golden light. It was very easy to distinguish the truth energy. This golden light was obviously not a kind of truth energy from Gerald or Judson, nor could it be from the snake goddess or Fuxie. However, if that were the case, then who else in the Pear Hill was strong enough to release such energy? Quickly recovering from his initial shock, Herbert snorted, "It won't be that easy to destroy my prison." Rumble, rumble, rumble. From the area where blue pillars collapsed, new ones sprung from the earth to quickly replace them, like a hydra. Herbert might have been the most quiet among the 6 Chaos Ancient Gods, but he was also the most determined. Once he decided to make a move, he would prepare solutions to deal with every possible situation he might face. In his eyes, it was futile for the Pear Hill to use powerful energy to stop the prison from forming. He knew that he'd be able to deal with whatever they threw his way. From the peak of the Pear Hill, Yan smiled as she watched the golden beam knock down multiple blue pillars. Tens of thousands of living beings of the Pear Hill were here, including her brother, the snake goddess and Fuxie. This was their last stronghold. No way was she going to sit back and watch it be destroyed before her. What the? When Yan saw the new blue pillars emerging from the ground, the smile was wiped from her face, and her eyes flashed coldly. Through gritted teeth, she muttered, "Let's see if you can grow pillars faster than I can chop them down." As soon as she finished speaking, she flicked her 10 fingers. Instantly, the energy that had been pulsating in the golden dress below her gathered at the energy shaft. Under Yan's control, the energy shaft shot out many golden light blades. The ability to control energy was innate to Yan. The first time she condensed the shadow of Snake Goddess, she had instantly mastered it. This was why the Snake Goddess had chosen Yan to cultivate the energy shaft. Swish, swish, swish. The golden light rained on the blue pillars. Any pillar that touched the golden light blades instantly collapsed. However, no matter how many pillars were smashed to pieces, new ones emerged to take their place. For Herbert, summoning blue pillars was as easy as breathing. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Even the massive Pear Hill began to shake slightly under the impact. Occasionally, mountain peaks would collapse and rocks would roll down along the mountain. However, no one bothered to bat an eyelash at this collateral damage. This was no big deal compared to what they were up against. The snake goddess, who had been hovering in the air nearby, watched as the golden light beams tore down pillars while new ones sprouted like bamboos. She pursed her lips, deep in thought. At this point, Herbert's and Yan's moves could only be regarded as a way to test the water. Yan shouldn't have been the first to fight, since she was one of the Pear Hill's trump cards. However, the snake goddess had arranged for her to be the first one to take action. Her hope was that by doing so, the Nihility race and the Element Spirit race would feel intimidated. At the very least, she wanted to give an impression that the Pear Hill was a force to be reckoned with. The tug of war became like a game of seesaw. 2 hours of this back and forth dynamic passed by. On the one hand, Herbert's truth energy could last long, and he was not afraid of it being consumed by the passing of time. On the other, Yan relied on the power of thousands of warriors in the Pear Hill. While these warriors were contributing their power, they were also constantly replenishing the divine crystals. Before the war began, the Pear Hill distributed all the divine crystals that had been tucked away over the years. Thus, they could hold out for probably a month. Another 6 hours passed. Both sides appeared to be very patient, especially Yan. This was her first time to face a Chaos Ancient God. She wasn't going to risk it all by being careless. Her eyes flashed determinedly, as she continued sending golden beams of light towards the blue pillars. However, Othniel didn't feel the same way. Exasperated, he saw no point in what Herbert was doing. If even after 8 hours they couldn't build a prison, then they should stop wasting time on it. Buzz! Othniel's huge eyeball flashed suddenly, and a huge ball appeared before him. Then, spikes that spanned 1,000,000 feet long appeared one after another all around the ball. As they appeared, they squeezed into the ball. In a short while, there were already over 10,000 spikes inside the ball. Shrink! Othniel spat impatiently. The ball began to shrink rapidly, and the 1,000,000-foot-long spikes inside the ball were also quickly compressed. Soon the ball was roughly the size of a massive boulder. Then, Othniel stretched out his hands and touched the surface of the ball gently, and a blue square enveloped the ball. Instantly, the ball was teleported into the pear hill without a warning. Through the cloud cover array, Yan could sense if anything had entered the pear hill. As soon as she noticed the presence of the ball, she flicked her finger towards it. Buzz! A golden light blade hit the ball. The ball by itself was already on the verge of bursting, since it was loaded to the brim with massive spikes. Even a full blow from an ordinary warrior at the other shore realm could easily shatter it, let alone Yan's golden light blade. However, the instant the ball shattered, it exploded and sent the 1,000,000-foot-long spikes raining onto the cloud cover array like meteors. As the spikes swept across the pear hill, peaks were sliced off and craters were formed. If they were to land on a sect in the pear hill, the entire sect would be destroyed, and the people inside would also be crushed to a pulp. Even the arrays set up on the mountains along the way were destroyed by the spikes. Seeing that his attack was working, Othniel continued. 3 more round balls appeared in front of him, and at the same time, more spikes squeezed in. In a flash of blue light, more balls were sent into the pear hill. But by now, the pear hill knew what to expect. In a flash, Judson appeared in front of one of the balls, and a glazed goblet had appeared in his hand. It was the heavenly glazed goblet. Bang! Judson threw it at the ball. The goblet swallowed it instantly. Bang! The round ball exploded inside the glazed goblet. The countless spikes were effectively blocked by the goblet's shell. Meanwhile, the second ball was swallowed by Gerald, who had appeared just in time. The spikes might cause damage to Gerald's body, but ordinary injuries were nothing to him. The snake goddess handled the last ball. While she might be inferior to Gerald and Judson in terms of strength, she was still extremely clever and wise. The instant the third ball appeared over the pear hill, she had tossed a thin rope towards it. The moment the rope looped around the ball, it was transported into the interior of the pear hill. The area in the center of the pear hill was incredibly vast. Even though the ball exploded inside the pear hill, the walls of the mountain were too incredibly thick that the spikes just buried themselves into the mountain after traveling tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of feet in the rock stratum. Chapter 3495, Compromise. This round of attack was blocked, but Othniel sneered as he said, "Can you block the attack every time?" The attacks from Othniel and Herbert were mainly aimed at destroying the fragile creatures in the pear hill. It was a good idea and was working so far. The energy that Yan's energy shaft had released was so powerful that even the Chaos Ancient Gods couldn't bear it. Only if Othniel and Herbert killed a large number of disciples, sect leaders and mountain leaders in the pear hill would Yan's foundation no longer exist. Buzz, buzz, buzz. 5 more huge balls appeared before Othniel. Once a large number of space spikes were compressed in the 5 balls, Othniel gently raised his hand and sent the 5 balls to the pear hill. "Let me deal with this alone." Judson's huge figure flashed above the pear hill. He was moving so fast that it gave people whiplash. His figure split into 5, each figure holding a heavenly glazed goblet in their hands. Bang, bang, bang. With 5 cracking sounds, the heavenly glazed goblets caught the balls pretty accurately. After the balls exploded, the spikes in the inner part of the balls could do nothing to the heavenly glazed goblets. Judson had single-handedly blocked Othniel's attack. When Othniel sensed this, he merely snorted but didn't adjust his methods. He still compressed the spikes inside the spheres, and sent them into the pear hill. But no matter how many spheres Othniel sent in, Judson blocked every single one of them. In the pear hill, the snake goddess had returned to the jadeite platform, her eyes gloomy. The pear hill had resisted the attacks of the 2 Chaos Ancient Gods. But this was still way below the snake goddess's expectations. "Othniel is so irritating. We keep defending the pear hill, but he is patient and just won't break in," the snake goddess said, frowning. The pear hill was powerful. The snake goddess had arranged a great counterattack method in the pear hill to deal with the Chaos Ancient Gods. She wanted to see which one of the gods attacked first. Her intuition told her that Othniel would be the first to break in. But Othniel wasn't stupid. He did what Herbert had done. He seemed to use formidable methods, but it was all a ruse to stall for time. "They want to wait for the members of the black ship to make the first move," said Fuxi, looking at the other side. He could clearly see a row of black ships floating in the air through the cloud cover array. The members of the black ship wanted the Chaos Ancient Gods to make the first move and then intended to reap the benefits. The Chaos Ancient Gods had the same thought. This was often the case when 3 parties competed against each other. "Well then, we'll just wait. I'd like to see who is more patient and who buckles first." The snake goddess pursed her lips and smiled. On the dark haze peak, Zen could see golden light blades shooting out and exploding in quick succession. Yan's strength was so terrifying, and every time a light blade exploded, it shook the pear hill. Zen looked serious. He had just reached the eternal realm and couldn't yet control his bloodline. The strength he could use in a battle of this level was limited, which annoyed him to no end. If the Chaos Ancient Gods and the Grand Master of Heaven were to really launch a large-scale attack on the pear hill, Yan, who was in control of the energy shaft, would probably be their first target. Zen was worried at this thought. I can't use the ancestry-level bloodline. All the changes that the ancestry-level bloodline has made before were only to restrain the external energy to protect itself. I might as well absorb an origin-level bloodline if this is the case, Zen said, helplessly shaking his head. Soon after he obtained the ancestry-level bloodline and when he left the eternal divine courtyard and passed through the spaces, the ancestry-level bloodline seemed to suddenly become generous. It even allowed Zen to comprehend the structure of the origin-level bloodlines. If Zen could adjust the abilities of the ancestry-level bloodline by himself, he could then change it into an origin-level bloodline. But ever since he had left the eternal scroll painting, the ancestry-level bloodline had become more and more independent, no longer giving Zen any rights. When the primeval Lord of Heaven heard Zen's voice, he knew that Zen was depressed. He was about to persuade Zen, when Zen, after having exhausted his chaotic source spirits, sliced through his arm, creating a wound. This time, a larger amount of the ancestry-level bloodline was released. The surface of the ancestry-level bloodline began to undulate, transforming into the shape of a little monster and roaring at Zen. Zen didn't understand its strange roar, but he still replied seriously, I don't care what your purpose of hiding in my body is, but I need strength to get through this. He pointed into the distance where 3 golden light blades exploded in the air. The huge sound waves spread throughout Pear Hill, causing the mountains to sway. Do you think you are safe? Zen sneered. Can you guarantee that there is no member from the Four Spirits sect behind them? Knowing your base, they would naturally have a way to defeat me and you. Zen could roughly understand the simple idea of the ancestry-level bloodline. It gave him the ability to protect himself, and could help Zen subdue everything. It wasn't concerned with the powerful strength that Zen was pursuing. The fist-sized blood beast was still howling, but its voice grew quieter. Zen was sure that the Four Spirits sect was the instant civilization. However, the Four Spirits sect was not one whole, so he couldn't figure out what exactly their standpoint was. But from what he knew, even the creatures of the Four Spirits sect were interested in the ancestry-level bloodline. If you help me, they won't catch me. I don't know what will happen if you don't help me, Zen said, threat evident in his voice. He had barely finished speaking when the blood beast roared again. Zen felt his body stiffen. His blood dragged his legs away, wanting to escape. He had just taken a step forward when Zen himself erupted with power. His legs were now tied together, and he fell to the ground. How can I let you get what you want? Zen said with a smile. He stood up from the ground as he spoke. Forced by the blood to run forward, he quietly exerted his strength and tripped himself again. The ancestry-level bloodline could only control Zen's physical body through his blood. But Zen's body still had bones and meridians. He still had the upper hand in the fight for the control of his body. Of course, this seemed only a temporary solution. The future was uncertain. Zen was obviously worried about it. Perhaps it had completely understood Zen's words, or perhaps it had realized that it couldn't change Zen's mind for the time being. The little blood beast that was still outside Zen's body groaned as if begging for mercy, and jumped onto Zen's shoulder. It didn't get in through the wound on Zen's right arm, but waited for Zen's permission. Are you willing to compromise? Zen said, smugly overjoyed. You should at least let me get an origin-level bloodline Thurgy. Chapter 3496, Black Snakes. As Zen spoke his last word, the ancestry-level bloodline began boiling within him. He sensed that it had used 6 abilities of the life quadrant, as well as the ability of the space-time quadrant, which ranked a bit lower than 80th in this quadrant. This was very rare. These 7 abilities mixed together to form the bloodline. Is this an origin-level bloodline? Zen froze for a moment as he pondered. These 373 abilities might have infinite combinations, but the origin-level bloodlines the Eternal Divine Courtyard had were those in the 4 spaces. Zen made an attempt to activate the bloodline ability and almost immediately felt a burning sensation within, as his body began transforming dramatically. Thin muscles bulged out and quickly morphed into a layer of thick and solid armor, which quickly sank and embedded itself on the surface of his skin, tightly enveloping his entire body. The sight of his own body left Zen in a dismal state. You didn't provide me with an origin-level bloodline. You did this to prevent me from letting my blood out again. The ancestry-level bloodline seemed unwilling to let Zen separate from it, and now this disgusting armor had overtaken his body to prevent him from harming himself and allowing any of it to leave. This is not enough to fight them. Aren't you afraid of being found out by them? Zen added a few more threatening remarks, but the ancestry-level bloodline just ignored him and didn't move. Rumble. The pear hill still shook slightly. Yan's proficiency in attacking with the energy shaft was improving greatly, and the golden light blades were being released faster and faster. They had now almost dug up an entire moat around the pear hill. Herbert continued driving the growth of the blue pillars. However, as Yan sped up her actions, the blue pillars that surrounded the pear hill began weakening and a huge gap appeared among them. If it went on like this, Yan could possibly completely suppress Herbert. As for the balls Othniel had thrown in, Judson had grabbed them all one by one. The pear hill was humongous, but destroying a province was still an easy task for the Chaos Ancient Gods. The energy Othniel and Herbert had released was already enough to destroy the pear hill several times. But under the protection of Yan and the others, the pear hill remained unmoved. On a black ship, the Grand Master of Heaven finally could take no more and grew irritable. After all, Othniel and Herbert were just as much his enemies. The only reason they worked together now was because they shared a common goal. These two Chaos Ancient Gods led an attack on the pear hill and were failing. They were obviously wasting time. Did they intend to keep stalling for time with this pitiful assault? The Grand Master of Heaven asked, frowning with annoyance. Taking note of his anger, the captain of the black ship responded, perhaps they need someone to finally break through and turn the tables. You mean they're waiting for me to take action? Queried the Grand Master of Heaven. I think so, the captain said and nodded. In that case, let me shatter this stalemate. The Grand Master of Heaven waved his hand, and the 6 soul flags floated up into the air. As he swayed gently, the black flames on the 6 soul flags flowed out like endless black snakes entangling with his cyan misty sword. He stretched a finger out to point at the cyan misty sword, and the aura of the life truth spread out. This got the attention of the captain, the members of the black ship, and even the evil god as they sensed the aura. The members of the black ship were bewildered at how the Grand Master of Heaven was able to use the life truth, but they then remembered he had used the space truth before and so thought nothing more of it. None had any idea how the Grand Master of Heaven had obtained such an ability. The evil god, however, had felt the energy of the truth crystal from Zen, and its aura was exactly the same as that of the Grand Master of Heaven. Once the black snakes in the cyan misty sword were infused with the energy of the life truth, they began circling the Grand Master of Heaven as if they had come to life. 10 snakes, 20, 30, 40. In a little more than a moment, he had created more than 300 black snakes. Buzz. He shook the cyan misty sword gently and flicked his right hand, and many blue space frames appeared on the black snakes' bodies. The Grand Master of Heaven then sent them into the pear hill. The black ship is taking action as well, the snake goddess announced gravely. They had been paying close attention to the Grand Master of Heaven as they battled the two Chaos Ancient Gods. After all, he was certainly more difficult to handle than these two. I'll deal with the black flames. Gerald had been entangled by the black flames before, and by means of the life truth, a unique formula had been created that extinguished the black flames. He had experience with these black flames and so felt confident facing them again. But when he let out his spiritual sense and was about to pull the black snakes out, he found himself perplexed. He was unable to detect any traces of the black fire snakes within the range of his spiritual sense. Fuxi and the snake goddess were having the same trouble. The intense energy was usually hard to miss with one's spiritual sense. It now being undetectable was truly strange. At that moment, inside the heavenly shuttle sect in the middle of the pear hill, many members of the snake goddess race continued offering the energy they had. Swish! A black snake appeared seemingly out of nowhere and headed straight for the sect leader. The leader of the heavenly shuttle sect was a powerful chaotic source realm warrior. She was still going through the test of the soul city, and was only one step away from the holy soul realm. She knew this snake coming at her was powerful and immediately employed her other shore token. But the black snake's speed was beyond what she had expected. It was too late, because when her other shore token was activated, the black snake had already bitten her on the neck and her body fell lifeless. Master! Master! The disciples of the heavenly shuttle sect fell into a panic. Some stepped back, some tried to protect the sect leader, and some attacked the black snake in vengeance. However, the black snake was incredibly quick and they could not track it with the spiritual sense. They stood no chance against it. Almost all the heavenly shuttle sect's disciples were killed within 30 seconds. Only a few smart and shrewd disciples managed to escape using the grand teleportation technique. Such massacres were taking place all across the pear hill. The snake goddess, Fuxi and the others couldn't locate the black snakes, but they sensed the hysteria, horror and fear among the commotion. The snake goddess and Fuxi were getting agitated as their numbers started dwindling. All sect leaders and mountain leaders, please do whatever you can to kill those black snakes. She issued the order and flashed to the heavenly shuttle sect. Her heart sank and broke when she saw their members fall to the ground, one after the other. The black snake hunted for a while and now wished to hide in the mountain. But before it could drill into the ground, the snake goddess got hold of it. It struggled in her grip and black flames burst out from it, burning the snake goddess' white fingers, contorting and charring them. But she seemed to feel no pain. She used the energy of the shadow of snake goddess to suppress the snake and smash it to pieces. Chapter 3497, Take the initiative to attack. Blood splattered across the ground as the snake goddess killed a black snake, then she quickly moved to the next place. She wasn't the only one who attacked. Upon hearing her call, Fuxi, the sect, and mountain leaders also jumped into action and cleared the black snakes in the Pear Hill. However, the area covered by their spiritual sense was much smaller than that of the snake goddess. Thus, they could only kill the black snakes near the central area of the Pear Hill. They couldn't reach the black snakes beyond that area. Furthermore, the spiritual sense couldn't be used to locate the 300 black snakes, so it was quite hard to kill them. When they sensed that a warrior of the Pear Hill had died, that was only when they could go to the place and kill. The wild flames were intense, but the Grand Master of Heaven had used them to create 300 black snakes, so the power was divided. Warriors at the Holy Soul Realm could resist them, as long as they were careful. Although they killed the black snakes, the Pear Hill had suffered many casualties. Within 5 minutes, the entire Pear Hill was in a fix. The snake goddess surmised that after the group of snakes entered the Pear Hill, over 700 members of the Pear Hill had died, which included many elites. Although the Pear Hill had many members, all the warriors who died were her members. No one could blame her for feeling devastated. Soon enough, Yan felt the panic of the people of the Pear Hill. After all, those mountain and sect leaders contributed nearly half of the energy needed. When they left to kill the black snakes, the energy used for the energy shaft naturally became unstable. Fortunately, Yan was quite skilled. She restrained the blue pillars that grew like mad with constant adjustment. When the mountain and sect leaders returned to their positions, the supply of energy to the energy shaft became stable again. Zen, who was in the dark haze peak, also saw the commotion, but he did not act rashly. Before the war, the snake goddess said that she was in command of everything. Elizabeth, Pierce, and some others were in another main peak and infused energy into the cloud cover array as well, but they also did not participate directly in the battle. When they returned to the jadeite platform, Fuxi looked calm as usual, but the snake goddess was a little worried. If everything continued like this, I'm afraid that the Pear Hill won't be able to hold on, the snake goddess said. Fuxi glanced at the snake goddess. He knew that she had a kind heart and didn't want to see her people die. However, it was common for millions of creatures to die in such a large-scale war. I'm afraid they won't come in, said Fuxi, lost in thought. According to the snake goddess's plan, everything would be successful if they could trick and lure a chaos ancient god into the Pear Hill then kill him. Now, it seemed that it was never going to happen. While Fuxi and the snake goddess racked their brains for a solution, the Grand Master of Heaven, who was in the distance, shook the 6 soul flags once more, and hundreds of black snakes dived into Pear Hill again. 5 minutes later, it appeared that things just repeated. The snake goddess and her people killed the black snakes once again, but more than a few thousand disciples of the Pear Hill had died. The core disciples were always few. How could they hold off against such a slaughter? At that moment, the snake goddess turned from worried to aggressive. She looked at Fuxi and said, if we let the real snake goddess and real Fuxi take over our physical bodies, we can fight our way out. After she came back to the Pear Hill, she talked to the real snake goddess once. The snake goddess quickly accepted her identity as an avatar. She felt the real snake goddess's character and real aura. She was the same as the real snake goddess, but the real one lived longer and was more knowledgeable. She didn't mind that the real snake goddess occupied her body. Furthermore, the real snake goddess remained trapped in stage 33 and the one she referred to right now was only an energy soul, so she could not really control her. However, Fuxi strongly opposed the idea. Even if she begged him in private, he would never compromise. But now that the people of the Pear Hill were dying one after another and they couldn't find a way to stop it, they had to change their previous strategy and take the initiative to attack. The safest way to do that was to let the real snake goddess and real Fuxi take over their bodies. No need. Fuxi shook his head. Fuxi, The snake goddess stared at her husband. She was begging him. Of course, she knew that Fuxi was a proud man. Then again, he was the #1 warrior when the Chaos Ancient Gods were excluded and was said to be the strongest warrior at the Eternal Realm. Even someone as powerful as Yellow Thirk, who had the element spirit race's support, was still no match for him. Now, to let someone occupy his body was ridiculous. Even if that person was the real Fuxi, he still found it hard to accept. When he felt that the snake goddess had stared at him for a while, he finally felt annoyed. He simply waved his hand and said, "I'll give him only 2 hours. After that, I will take back my physical body." Meanwhile, the Grand Master of Heaven was quite satisfied with his attack method. In many cases, small tricks often had a good effect. The people in the Pear Hill guarded the place with all their might, so he naturally wouldn't charge recklessly. The best option was to force them out step by step while he waited. That was the most effortless way. When he released the 5th wave of black snakes, the situation in the Pear Hill far away finally changed. The white clouds that surrounded the Pear Hill quickly dissipated and revealed the vast, green mountain range. As the cloud cover array was removed, an enormous figure, which was millions of feet high, emerged. It was neither Judson nor Gerald, but the real Fuxi, who had activated the wild god body. The corners of his mouth curved up in relief. "I haven't fought for a long time." Then, he spread out his hands, and the blood in his body flowed at insane speeds. Compared to Fuxi in this round of chaos, the real Fuxi had more power and control over his bloodline. Clap, he clapped his hands, then 2 marks of 8 diagrams appeared on his palms. "You can make a move now." As he spoke, he slammed his hands hard on the ground. Buzz, Othniel and Herbert were both in the Taoism province. Suddenly, enormous marks of 8 diagrams appeared under their feet, and the same happened to Grand Master of Heaven, who was in the Victory province. This is. Upon seeing the big mark, the Grand Master of Heaven felt a chill run down his spine. In turn, he quickly grew up to 10 million feet high. With a wave of his hand, he sucked the black ship into his long sleeve and suddenly teleported away. Boom! Powerful palm prints immediately fell from the top of the marks of 8 diagrams, and a bottomless pit appeared on the ground. The Grand Master of Heaven only took away 1 black ship. The other black ships swiftly turned into thousands of pieces as the palm prints covered them. Although these black ships could repair themselves, the captain of the black ship still felt crushed when he saw that the black ships were destroyed just like that. Still, the real Fuxi didn't stop attacking, and his large hands continuously slapped the ground. As the palm prints kept coming down, the Grand Master of Heaven, Othniel, and Herbert had no choice but to move and dodge. The Grand Master of Heaven was confused when he dodged and retreated. He had never seen Fuxi become so powerful when he fought against him before. It seemed that he suddenly became a different person, which reminded the Grand Master of Heaven of the Fuxi in the past. This was not a good omen. Just as Othniel and Herbert still dodged, the real Snake Goddess, the real Eastern Emperor Tai, Gerald, and Judson all rushed towards the Victory Province at the same time. The Snake Goddess planned that they would all charge forward to take down the Grand Master of Heaven first, then deal with the Chaos Ancient Gods next. Chapter 3498, The Second Truth. The marks of 8 diagrams appeared one after another under the Grand Master of Heaven's feet while he dodged the palm prints that kept descending from the sky. The ground behind him was densely packed with palm prints, which formed a wide ditch. Boom! The moment he avoided another 1 palm print, he became shocked when he saw the Pear Hill. His spiritual sense always covered an area with a radius of over 100 million miles. He saw that the Snake Goddess, Eastern Emperor Tai, Gerald, and Herbert were fast approaching. Eastern Emperor Tai. Although it was his first time to descend into the chaos, the black ship was always the one that gathered the information from the source world then sent it to him before. Of course, he knew that Eastern Emperor Tai had defeated Emperor Charm easily. He also knew that the real Eastern Emperor Tai had gotten trapped in stage 33. It must be the case that someone had taken over his physical body, which greatly enhanced his strength. The truth behind it might be a puzzle for others, but the Grand Master of Heaven easily figured out what had happened. Now, Fuxi had become much more powerful, and perhaps the Snake Goddess's strength had also increased. They might have let the real Fuxi and the real Snake Goddess take over their bodies. Since the Grand Master of Heaven faced them alone, the pressure he felt naturally increased. Had it been someone else, they probably would have run away by now. He could at least join the 2 Chaos Ancient Gods who were in the Taoism province. Yet, he didn't choose to escape. Instead of continuing to dodge the palm prints of 8 diagrams, he suddenly stopped in midair. Boom, boom, boom. Fuxi continued to slap the ground in the pear hill, but the palm prints went through the Grand Master of Heaven's body. The Grand Master of Heaven was like a ghost in the air, and he avoided all his attacks. That was the ability of the Chaos Ancient God Othniel, the void illusory world, which could create a unique separate space for him to stay. Grand Master of Heaven, long time no see. The bright-eyed snake goddess exclaimed. Because it was the real snake goddess, she spoke in an unusually confident manner. HMPH, it's just as I thought. Even if you have a complete body to use, you still can't bring your full strength into play, the Grand Master of Heaven coldly shot back. At that moment, the snake goddess spread her fingers and gently lifted them. In turn, crimson energy filaments burst out from her snow-white skin. The energy filaments constantly whirled and changed, then finally turned into a gigantic shadow of snake goddess. Usually, after the snake goddess activated her wild god body, her body would grow as high as 8 million feet, while her shadow reached up to 10 million feet high. This time, however, her shadow extended up to 100 million feet high. It covered the sky and the sun, and contained endless energy. The Grand Master of Heaven, Gerald, and Judson looked very small in front of the shadow of snake goddess. It should be enough to kill you, the snake goddess said seriously. As soon as she finished speaking, her large shadow slammed down the Grand Master of Heaven's head. Swoosh! The void illusory world was completely independent from the outside space. Although the shadow of snake goddess was powerful, it didn't harm the Grand Master of Heaven at all. Still, she was in no way discouraged. The energy beams on the shadow's hands continuously entangled with the Grand Master of Heaven until they completely wrapped around him. It's useless, the Grand Master of Heaven sneered. Really, the void illusory world may not be invincible as you think. Suddenly, Gerald, who was at the side, released powerful life energy. Numerous silkworms with wings came out of the dark green fog, and each of them had a pair of sharp teeth that glowed blue on their heads. They were the world-devouring silkworms, a kind of creature Gerald had created. He knew that he would fight against the other Chaos Ancient Gods one day, so he was naturally prepared. He created the world-devouring silkworms to deal with Othniel, but he did not expect that the Grand Master of Heaven had Othniel's ability. Thus, they came handy at the moment. Crack, crack, crack. The world-devouring silkworms flapped their wings and flew towards the Grand Master of Heaven. The sharp teeth on their heads clattered and devoured the space bit by bit. The task looked as easy as eating leaves to them. The Grand Master of Heaven didn't know that Gerald had such a power. When he saw the world-devouring silkworms move forward to devour him, he had no choice but to get out of the void illusory world. Just as he came out, however, the snake goddess's energy beams were already there to bind him. PFF'd. Crimson energy beams quickly corroded his body. Even the body of a warrior at the Eternal Realm could not endure the erosion from the shadow of Snake Goddess. At that point, the Grand Master of Heaven's skin became charred. However, it only lasted for quite a short period. A strong force of life truth suddenly emerged from the Grand Master of Heaven's body. A green mist rolled out, and not only did it repair his body, but it also left a thick layer of tissue on his skin. The mist formed the layer of tissue, especially to deal with the energy of the shadow of Snake Goddess. As a result, the erosion caused by the shadow of Snake Goddess wouldn't be as strong. Life truth. He can also use the life truth. How did he make it? Gerald said in utter disbelief. It wasn't a big deal that the Grand Master of Heaven used Othniel's Thurgy, as perhaps Othniel had made an exchange with him. The big deal was that the Grand Master of Heaven also exhibited the life truth, which was puzzling. But now they were in a battle, so Gerald didn't have the time to think about it. When he saw that the Grand Master of Heaven was about to forcefully come out of shadow of Snake Goddess, his body suddenly slipped, and his large tail stabbed the Grand Master of Heaven. The poison of decomposition at the end of his tail was incurable. Someone as powerful as Claire still died after she was poisoned, and the Grand Master of Heaven was no exception. But of course, the Grand Master of Heaven knew Gerald better than Claire did. Thus, he had decided to pay particular attention to Gerald's movements. As soon as he saw the needle stab towards him, he turned over and quickly avoided it. The second he dodged the tail, a golden sword shadow fell straight towards him. Without even looking at it, the Grand Master of Heaven held the cyan misty sword in his hand. Bang, bang, bang. The huge swords clashed against each other, and the sword radiance danced in all directions. Every collision was powerfully destructive. If the creatures in the Victory Province looked up, the dazzling golden light would blind their eyes. After the Grand Master of Heaven and the real Eastern Emperor Tai had exchanged dozens of sword strikes in an instant, the Grand Master of Heaven suddenly stepped into the void. His big body was like a ghost as he flew south, which was the location of the Taoism province. His goal was to get the other two Chaos Ancient Gods who were in the Taoism province involved. Go after him. At that point, the Snake Goddess, Gerald, and the others followed him closely. At first, Othniel and Herbert, who were in the Taoism province, were still panicking when they faced Fuxie's attack. However, the attacks of the 8 diagrams and the palm prints came a little delayed as they reached the Taoism province. Furthermore, it wasn't hard to avoid them with their abilities. At the same time, the two Chaos Ancient Gods also noticed that the pair Hill took the initiative to attack the Grand Master of Heaven. Othniel and the Grand Master of Heaven were not on the same side. In reality, Othniel was afraid of the Grand Master of Heaven when it came to strength. Since the pair Hill had exhibited powerful capabilities, it would be a good thing for them if they took the opportunity to kill the Grand Master of Heaven. After all, the contract restricting twin-headed snake didn't require Othniel to help the Grand Master of Heaven. It turned out that all this time, the two Chaos Ancient Gods chose to stand by and not interfere. What they didn't expect was that the Grand Master of Heaven evaded the attacks launched by the people of Pear Hill, then charged straight towards them. Chapter 3499, A Sneak Attack. Eternal Realm Masters wouldn't take long to cross an entire province. The Grand Master of Heaven and the people chasing him were far stronger than ordinary Eternal Realm warriors, and as a result, were much faster. That was why Othniel and Herbert had to make a quick decision. Should we avoid them or fight? Herbert asked, puzzled. The goal that was Herbert's priority was to subvert the Pear Hill and help the Element Spirit race complete the Purge Way. He didn't have an opinion about Fuxie, the Snake Goddess, or even Zen. It was purely a matter of stance on the future. On the other hand, Othniel looked hesitant. Their previous attack against the Oneness Sky Palace had been a complete failure. The people belonging to all the forces involved, like the Divine Farmer race, the Bearing race, and the New Moon race had died or escaped during the war. Even Claire had been killed. Now, Fuxie's and the Snake Goddess's strength had greatly increased, and with the help of Eastern Emperor Tai and the other two Chaos Ancient Gods, Pear Hill had become an invincible force. If the Grand Master of Heaven were to be defeated or even killed by them, what would await him and Herbert before the Pear Hill? These thoughts lingered in Othniel's mind for a while before he made his decision. We should fight, he said eventually. He had barely finished saying this when blue dust appeared in his huge eye. If one looked carefully, they'd realize that the blue dust motes were numerous cubes the size of a fist. They only looked tiny like dust before Othniel's huge form. The blue cubes disappeared from Othniel's eye and appeared to the east of the Taoism province, floating irregularly in the air. These cubes were insignificant to the powerful warriors who had activated the wild god bodies. Gerald warned the others as he noticed the sudden appearance of the blue dust. Be careful, they're inverse spaces released by Othniel. The moment Gerald alerted his companions, Othniel activated the cubes. The blue spaces, originally the size of a fist, expanded rapidly to a width of about 1 million feet each. These inverse spaces instantly filled up the space at the south of the Taoism province. These inverse spaces were a special type of space. There seemed to be nothing inside, but they were, in fact, filled with a special energy. Gerald, the Snake Goddess, and the others felt like they were running in water the moment they were trapped in these spaces. Their speed slowed down considerably. The Grand Master of Heaven was also caught up in an inverse space, but Othniel could control these spaces at will. Under his control, the inverse spaces before the Grand Master of Heaven quickly turned back into the size of a fist. Once his path was cleared, the Grand Master of Heaven regained his former speed and in just a few seconds, had left the Snake Goddess's group far behind. The real Fuxie, who was in the Pear Hill, became worried as he witnessed this scene unfold. He turned around and told Zen, "I'll leave the Great Array in your care. I have to go and help them." Saying thus, he created a space channel and entered it in a flash. In just a second, he was gone. The Great Array that the real Fuxie had mentioned to Zen had something to do with the ear mice. The ear mouse race had always been a force to be reckoned with in the source world. This race was omnipresent and extremely rich. Yellow Thirk had tried to befriend the ear mouse race many times, but the ear mice had always stayed neutral. They seemed uninterested in both the Purge Way and the Finale Way. Every businessman was believed to always be on the fence. Yellow Thirk didn't really care about what the ear mice thought as long as they didn't side with the Pear Hill. But King Luan's real intentions were not what it showed the world. The ear mice's great fortune relied on their huge numbers, making it impossible for them to follow the Purge Way. A long time ago, the ear mice had secretly allied themselves with the Pear Hill. King Luan was at the Eternal Realm, but its strength wasn't even noteworthy among the other Eternal Realm warriors. However, no one in the source world could compete with it in terms of wealth. The divine crystals that King Yayan had collected for so many years might account for more than half of the amount in the entire source world. These divine crystals contained pure energies. Many people coveted such a great fortune, but none of them knew where the ear mice hid them. Even Zen had known nothing about this until recently. He was astonished that all the divine crystals were hidden in the Pear Hill. With her unprecedented talent, the snake goddess had used the divine crystals to set up an array, which had turned out to be a huge trap. Even a chaos ancient god would find it hard to escape this trap alive if they were to fall into it. The snake goddess and Fuxi had previously wanted to lure Othniel or Herbert into this trap, but neither of them had dared approach the Pear Hill. Because of this, the people in the hill had been forced to leave their field and fight. Now that Fuxi had left to join the battle, the great array was handed over to Zen. Once Fuxi left, the lines on the surface of the jadeite platform began to flash, a green light gathering beneath Zen's feet. Zen had now become the center of the array. The whole of Pear Hill instantly became translucent in Zen's view, and a massive amount of divine crystals appeared before his eyes. "There are so many divine crystals," he exclaimed. The divine crystals were equally distributed around the Pear Hill as they circled around it. The Pear Hill was nearly as broad as the province where it lay, and these divine crystals occupied close to 1/7 of its entire surface. Counting these divine crystals one by one would undoubtedly lead to an astronomical figure. If we fully activate the energy of these divine crystals, will it be enough to destroy the entire Pear Hill? Zen asked, dazed. "There's no need for so many. 10% of them will do," the primeval Lord of Heaven said. It was not difficult to invade a defenseless Pear Hill. Any Eternal Realm warrior could do that alone. However, this great array that had been formed by divine crystals had the power to kill even a chaos ancient god. At the center of this great array sat several powerful creatures, King Yayan of the Ear Mouse race in the lead. When the snake goddess had asked for help a few days ago, the core members of the Ear Mouse race had come to preside over this great array in succession. Zen observed the goings-on for a while before he looked around, only to meet his sister's gaze. The siblings exchanged a warm smile. As the battle went on, the fate of the Pear Hill had now been handed over to them. An intense fight was taking place in the Taoism province, while the Pear Hill was strangely quiet in contrast, as if they weren't involved in the war. The disciples and the other members on the Pear Hill were relieved for a moment. They couldn't participate in the higher-level battle. All they could do was pray silently as they remained in the Pear Hill. It was then that a huge figure suddenly appeared in the sky above the Pear Hill. It was a creature with white hair all over the body. The appearance of this creature caused an invisible chill to quickly spread over them from above. The temperature dropped sharply, and silver-white frosts began to spread down from the top of the Pear Hill, like a circular ice ring blooming around it. Both Zen and Yan raised their heads to try to get a clear look at the figure clearly. Their faces hardened, almost in unison. This was Lamont, the third chaos ancient god who had followed the Purge Way. Once he arrived at the Pear Hill, he decided to ignore the fight in the Taoism province and attack the Pear Hill first. He probably believed that since Fuxi had left, there was no one left to guard the Pear Hill, and that it would be an easy task to destroy the hill. The temperature was still dropping rapidly, many rocks in the Pear Hill freezing and shattering into pieces with a cracking burst. If the temperature continued to drop, all living creatures in the Pear Hill would freeze to death. Yan wouldn't allow this to happen. She stretched out her hands, and under her control, the cloud cover array worked to block the deadly cold air attacking the Pear Hill from outside. Chapter 3500, Activate the Array. While isolating the freezing air from the Pear Hill, Yan also activated the energy flow of the cloud cover array. Not only did the members and disciples of the Pear Hill live in the Pear Hill, there were also many mortals there who could not cultivate. The temperature did not drop all that low when the frigid air reached the edge of the Pear Hill. Even so, for those mortals, it would still be a fatal exposure. Sensing this, Yan frowned and aimed her energy at the huge creature above. The mission Yan had been given by the snake goddess was to amass the power of Pear Hill and do all that was needed to protect it. However, till now, she had been running a defensive movement only. After suffering fierce attacks for half a day, she finally had the chance to strike back. Naturally, Yan poured out masses of energy without any hesitation. Swoosh, 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 huge golden light blades formed and shot upwards. The energy contained within those golden light blades couldn't be underestimated, not even by the Chaos Ancient God. Hiss! Lamont hovered in the sky and suddenly opened his mouth, taking a deep breath. His huge belly bulged even more. Swoosh! The air, which had been sucked into his stomach, suddenly spewed forth again. The cold air erupting out from the huge body was enough to create a freezing hurricane. However, the chill was not as fierce as the others had feared. Instead, it formed a gentle white zone of cold beneath him. When the golden blades entered this zone, they lost momentum, slowed down, and finally stopped. The golden light of the blades' surface suddenly dimmed, and the blades completely melted away in this cold band. The golden blades possessed energy at a fiery temperature. Though they melted, they also reduced the cold air by several degrees. Yan's face darkened slightly, she flicked her hands, and more golden light blades appeared, shooting outwards. No matter how powerful the strength of the Chaos Ancient God was, the truth power he possessed was limited. Given the massive divine crystals in the pear hill, Yan could naturally squander them at will. The golden light blades surged up like a kaleidoscope of butterflies, quickly melting through the cold area. After completely heating up the cold band, more golden light blades shot towards Lamont with a violent intent. Lamont merely looked down at Yan in silence. His originally motionless body suddenly disappeared, and then reappeared on the top of the pear hill. He was only 1 million feet away from Yan. Everyone knew that Lamont was 10 million feet tall. 1 million feet was only a small step for him. Whoosh! The instant he appeared, Lamont was already swinging his fist towards Yan's head. Yan, seeing this dilemma, Zen was shocked, and the hair on his body stood on end. Yan was not at the Eternal Realm, so her physical strength was barely stronger than that of an ordinary chaotic Source Realm warrior. Not to mention taking a full blow from the Chaos Ancient God, even if she was hit by only one of Lamont's fingers, she would be smashed to pieces. Facing Lamont's attack, Yan didn't panic. She reached out her hand, gently stroking the golden dress. A golden shield suddenly enveloped her with a protection radius of hundreds of thousands of feet. Zen on the jadeite platform was also enveloped inside. Bang! Lamont's punch struck the shield, making a booming sound. The golden shield, which was fortified and sturdy, merely vibrated slightly. Then Yan waved her hands, and the golden blades fired forth from the energy shaft, traveling at great velocity. Because of the small distance, the first 3 golden light blades instantly ripped into Lamont's chest. Boom, boom, boom. With 3 muffled sounds, 3 huge and bloody holes appeared on Lamont's chest. Blood gushed out from the holes like a triple waterfall, and the smell of blood pervaded the pear hill. Lamont clearly hadn't expected the power of these light blades to be so massive. He had no option but to flee far away in pain. Obviously, Yan didn't intend to let him off so easily. As long as he was within the pear hill, he was within range of her attack. The endless light blades hotly pursued Lamont. With these continuous explosions, a series of golden lights bloomed in the sky. Zen breathed a sigh of relief. The cloud cover array the snake goddess had set up was still powerful, and even the Chaos Ancient God wasn't able to destroy it so easily. But at this point, an old voice suddenly sounded in Zen's ear. Zen, if Lamont draws near again, we must seize the opportunity to activate the divine crystal array to trap and kill him in the pear hill. The whisper was the voice of King Yayan. It indeed presented a great opportunity when Lamont got so close just now. But while Zen was worried about Yan's safety, he had completely forgotten about it. Although King Yayan controlled the entire divine crystal array, it couldn't activate it, and only Zen had the power to do that from the jadeite platform. King Yayan could only remind Zen kindly. I see. Zen nodded. From above the divine crystal array in the pear hill, King Yayan also nodded to the other creatures. The idea of building the divine crystal array had been King Yayan's proposal, but to perfect and establish it had still depended on the snake goddess. Even the other shore tokens of the several creatures that were in charge of the divine crystal array were searched and obtained by the snake goddess and Fuxi in stage 33 of the other shore. It was also due to the combined power of these other shore tokens that the power of the divine crystal array could be swung into play. Lamont retreated a short distance and roared at the sky. The muscles in his chest wriggled and then healed themselves. It was obvious that he was not as cautious as Othniel. The human girl wasn't even at the Eternal Realm, but she had actually hurt him. It was proving a great humiliation. Whoosh, whoosh, a circle of white cold air emanated from Lamont's body. In a moment, an armor of solid ice formed on the surface of his body, and thus armored, he pounced on Yan again. Despite Yan's golden light blades being extremely powerful, Lamont still intended to fight her head-on. Boom, 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 boom. When the golden blades collided head-on with Lamont's armor, something strange happened. As the golden light blades impacted on the armor, their lights flashed and disappeared. Other Chaos Ancient Gods might not dare to resist the golden light blades as Lamont did, but his armor was the nemesis of all pure energy. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Yan hurled out over 100 golden light blades in quick succession, but they were all absorbed by Lamont's solid ice armor. Seeing Lamont's huge body dashing over, Yan had no choice but to employ the golden shield again. Bang! The golden shield vibrated, but it was still stable. Lamont didn't show any mercy at all. He stretched out his fists, and even his fist shadows smashed at Yan from all directions. Bang! 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 As tens of thousands of punches landed against the golden shield, the shield trembled more violently. Yan's face became pale, and panic could be seen flashing in her eyes. Each punch could obliterate her. If the golden shield was broken, she would definitely perish, and even her brother would not be able to survive. All of a sudden, Yan remembered the divine crystal array. In a panic, she looked at Zen. It was not difficult for Zen to activate the entire divine crystal array, however, the one who really controlled it was King Yayan below. He sat cross-legged on the jadeite platform, with his hands on it. The green luster of the platform quickly gathered in his hands. The jadeite platform began to slowly rotate. The entire divine crystal array became like a massive hungry beast that began to devour enormous amounts of divine crystals.